Matters of privilege and recognition of guests, the Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and welcome back and good afternoon to my colleagues in the legislature, all those tuned in online or through Eastlink, as well as to our friends in the media who are tuned in as well. Mr. Speaker, I want to begin my greetings by saying how nice it was and how pleased I was to join the Minister of Veterans Affairs, the Honourable Lawrence Macaulay, in the lovely village of Cardigan today as we presented wreaths in recognition of the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Cap Yong, Mr. Speaker, an important battle in the Korean War. It was a lovely gesture, and I appreciate the invitation from the Minister to join him. I also wanted to say congratulations and thanks, Mr. Speaker, to the Western Red Wings, Mr. Speaker, who won their 4th straight Island Junior Hockey League title yesterday, defeating Sherwood in 5 games, Silas Handrahan, the MVP, Mr. Speaker. And what's equally significant is that Alex Hutchison would have been a member of that team this year, and they carried his number 14 jersey throughout them with the journey this year to the championship. Mr. Speaker, of course, we know Alex and Ethan Riley were lost last fall in a tragic accident. And it's also, I think, a fitting end to the hockey season that just last week, Ethan's team, the Western Regals, also won the PEI midget or the under-18 AAA championship, Mr. Speaker, and a very nice recognition for both of those two wonderful players and wonderful young men, Mr. Speaker, who are dearly missed. I also want to say, Mr. Speaker, that today is Earth Day, first proclaimed, I believe, in 1970, and when you think how far we've come, Mr. Speaker, it's amazing, but it's also evidence of how far we need to go. The one thing I think about when I hear people celebrating Earth Day and doing their little bit, whether it's picking up garbage, Mr. Speaker, or any effort like that, that we don't need to be concerned about our size or what role we play. Any role we play is significant, Mr. Speaker, and I am always reminded of the words of Edward Hale, who says that, I'm only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, Mr. Speaker, that I will not refuse to do the something that I can. And I think that's fitting, Mr. Speaker, for our province as well. I know all of us as elected members have heard, why are we doing this or doing that for the environment when countries so much bigger than ours aren't doing it or aren't as committed to it as we are, Mr. Speaker. But it's that little bit you can do at a time, Mr. Speaker, that makes a big difference in the long scheme of things. 1970 wasn't that long ago, Mr. Speaker. And we all know that we're going to look into the future, and 2021 was going to be not that long ago either, Mr. Speaker. But if we continue to make a little bit of difference every day, it turns into something big, Mr. Speaker. So with that, I will say enjoy the proceedings today and happy Earth Day to all Islanders, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to wish everybody a happy Earth Day. I appreciate the Premier's remarks that it is important that we recognise, even though we may be individuals, that we have to do what we can with what we have where we are, and that's true for us as individual human beings, but also in a small jurisdiction like this. Of course, we are a tiny part of Canada, 0.5% of the population of this whole country, a large country, albeit in a world where the problems can feel overwhelming. But that cannot stop us from making our individual contributions, and I appreciate the Premier's remarks on that. Talking of small individual contributions, I had the pleasure of attending the South Shore Watershed Association annual general meeting last night in Crapo Community Hall, and it was a lovely thing. The guest presenter was Sean Hill, who's, of course, the coordinator of the ALICE program here, the Alternative Land Use Services program, and also past director of the PEI Watershed Alliance. And he gave a very informative presentation on the ALICE program and all of the benefits that have accrued to farmers and other landowners, and also to wildlife habitat here on Prince Edward Island, and what an important program that is, and how unique it is to Prince Edward Island. So his remarks are very appreciated. I want to pass on my congratulations and also my thanks to the board of directors there. That would be Dina Blott, who's the president, Vice President Brenda Graves, and the board members Daphne Davey, Alison Jenkins, Megan Jones, and Bonnie Reber. And it was a very well-attended event, and for those of us who are used to going out on a, 2 or 3 events a day sometimes, this rare event was a lovely thing. I also want to thank the manager of these watersheds, and it covers a very large area from Augustine Cove through Tryon River, Westmoreland River, DeSable River, all of that South Shore area, managed by this one watershed association, and an individual, Juliana Ganzotti, who is tasked with she's the only employee of the South Shore Watershed Association, and she gave a presentation, astonishing amount of work being carried out by one individual. Again, one individual in one watershed area of a small island in a large country in an enormous world, but a significant contribution. So thank you to all of them for that. Another local event was the grade 6 class at Englewood Elementary School recently completed an Art Smarts project, and it was on species at risk. Again, the person who led that was Dina Blott, the president of the South Shore Watershed Association, making an enormous contribution to her community in all kinds of ways. So thank you again, Dina, for that. And the project that they did was dedicated to the memory of biologist and conservationist and watershed expert Daryl Guignon, and of course his kids, at least 2 of his children, Evelyn and Harrison, both went to Englewood School. So it was a lovely project. I looked at some of the work that was done online, and it's really lovely. And Daryl was, again, commemorated and remembered with great fondness last night at the South Shore Watershed Association. So again, happy Earth Day to everybody, and let's make our own little contributions. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Mr. Speaker, I'd certainly like to welcome everyone back. It's great to be back and say hello to everyone in the wonderful district of Evangeline Muscush who may be tuned in today. Also, I'd like to make mention to and recognize today, April 22nd, as Earth Day, a day designed to create an international movement to drive environmental change for people on this planet. Earth Day was first established in 1970 in the United States due to efforts from Senator Gaylord Nelson and activist Denny Hayes. And they choose April 22nd as it was between spring break and final exams, designed to maximize student participation. Islanders have many different ways they participate in Earth Day, such as conducting early roadside cleanups, planting new trees and shrubs to recapture carbon, volunteer with local watershed groups, and yard cleanups, and many more. I am pleased to see Islanders doing their part to recognize this important day and taking steps in their own lives to better our environment. And as we all know, we only have one planet. Also, I would like to congratulate the Arsenal Fish Mart Western Capitals. Red Wings, I'm sorry, Western Capitals. Western Red Wings, who captured their 4th straight victory last night in the Junior B Hockey Championship. And I can't say enough for owner Robert Arsenault and the coach Nathan Drosh, and a big shout out to the MVP Silas Handrahan. Congratulations to all members of the team, and enjoy your victory. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Greetings to listeners from Brighton and elsewhere, and of course, a big happy birthday to Mother Earth. I read my morning paper, and it was, of course, full of stuff, articles about treating Mother Earth better to make her happy, and I particularly stood out was an article about Colonel Gray's students protesting about all the garbage created there. They were demanding recyclable cutlery, I think, among other things. And I was reminded by this about the thousands of drivers who, on their way into work, pick up a cup of coffee in a disposable cup on their way to work. Yet, I bet every one of those drivers already have a perfectly serviceable, reusable steel or plastic cup. Let PEI celebrate Earth Day by taking the next step. We eliminated plastic bags and plastic straws. It's time to eliminate the disposable coffee cup as well. That would be a suitable birthday present for Mother Earth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Did I miss anyone? No? Member statement. For our first member statement, I'll call on Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would I be standing here today without the hard work of a group of volunteers? Likely not. Likely none of us would. It isn't hard to see the incredible impact volunteers have in our communities. Every Wednesday, I'm in early at Elm Street School preparing free breakfasts for hundreds of elementary students. And it's not just me, it's a team of volunteers every day. My neighbors are a part of PEI Ground Search and Rescue. They drop what's going on in their lives and rush to help islanders in distress, all volunteer work. Fire departments are populated with many volunteers, and no one can doubt the service they provide for our communities. Our Inspire Learning Centre in Summerside, the Rotary Friendship Park, and other initiatives have already been successful in the Summerside area, all from volunteer work. The Pei Discovery Center has a strong team of volunteers behind it, trying to get a centre in Summerside that will be of great benefit to tourism, culture, and education on PEI. Roadside cleanup also benefits greatly from volunteers. A wonderful tribute to my friend Josh Underhay and his son Oliver occurred recently. He would be pleased to know such a service happened in their name. There are so many initiatives on PEI that would never have been or will become successful without the effort of dedicated volunteers that believe in the outcome. One of the major benefits of having volunteers do the work is that you know it's a project of passion. They truly believe in what they're doing for the public, and as such, the quality of projects that arise from their work is truly exemplary. I want to take this opportunity to thank many of the volunteers that contribute to what is best in our society. In its essence, volunteering is when we work together to get the best outcomes for others without need for recognition or reward. However, despite the overall modesty and selfishness of volunteers I just mentioned, it's National Volunteer Week. So I wanted to say thank you to all the volunteers across the island. You deserve all the thanks in the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Mr. Speaker, we've had successive governments say that we were climate leaders, when in reality we've been falling short on climate action, but that's not always easily understood. I recently saw a Twitter thread by Cam Fenton that explained this through hockey, and I thought given how much the members in this House like to talk about hockey, and for Earth Day, I'd give it a go. So bear with me, Mr. Speaker. We've played pretty bad for the last two periods by not cutting emissions nearly enough in the last 2 decades. It's basically been a shutout for climate change, so we're heading into the third period trailing by 3 goals. Let's not kid ourselves. Climate change isn't the Leafs, so they're not likely to blow a 3-goal lead in the third. The world's best climate scientists are reffing this game, and they have been absolutely clear that this is the last period. If we do not catch up, we lose. The GM has just shuffled the coaching staff, and Coach Climate Action is now in charge. It's second intermission, and he is saying that he's got a plan to score a couple of goals and tie things up by 2030. I'm here for that, but 2 goals in PEI's context means removing a big chunk of emissions in transportation, or 1 big chunk in transportation and 1 in ag. Remember, we need 3 to tie and 4 to win, and we probably don't want a chance taking this into overtime. Our players are the tools we have to cut emissions and score a goal. I'm looking at the bench trying to figure out who the coach has in mind for a star player. We have Carbon Pricing, who has been in a slump all season, in large part because the coach of the last team put him on the 4th line, and because of the things that the rest of his team has said about him, half the fans hate him anyway. So, the coach isn't really talking about using him to score a goal. Another player, EV Rebates, has potential, but he's really a third-line grinder, and the coach has been banking on a hat trick from him. Probably not the best strategy. Recently, the coach has been musing about winning it in overtime with a trick play that is small modular nuclear reactors, which is highly theoretical, unproven, and not... It is a risky, unproven strategy, and it won't matter anyway unless we tie it up first before the end of regulation. Those of us who are following the game are rooting for our team, and we want to know which players to watch. Coach Climate Action is telling us he's got this in the bag, so he must be planning to rely on a star player, but we honestly don't know who that is. For 2 decades, no coach even kept stats on any of the players, so it was really hard to know who had a good shot and who didn't. It's easier with a couple of star players, but really the key to winning the game, is depth. All 4 lines putting in 110%. We need a goal soon, so for Earth Day, let's show Islanders the playbook. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cornwall, Meadowbanks, third-party House Leader.
Better hold yours till tomorrow.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. I feel like I'm like the guy in the pub having a beer cheering to the screen. That's all right. Mr. Speaker, as we move into the spring, there are more and more students heading home for the island. They were looking forward to reuniting with family and hopefully taking on new summer jobs. However, as we all know, there are increased travel restrictions and more to come, both here on the island and across Canada. For many young islanders and their families, this represents a very serious problem. Over the last couple of days, I've heard from families who simply do not have the house space to effectively allow people to social distance. Of course, they all want to follow the rules, and they will. But many of us live in small homes, possibly apartments, and this challenge is real. Frankly, I wonder if the government is taking the steps necessary to allow young people to self-isolate in a safe way that doesn't entirely disrupt their life. Some people can afford to go to hotels, but in a time of rising prices and increased costs, not everyone can do this. Our tourism operators have accommodations sitting empty. Government could be utilizing those facilities for returning students who need to self-isolate, while giving operators an early shot in the arm to begin what could be a difficult tourism season. Furthermore, the fact of the matter is that we do provide paid accommodations for many people arriving on Prince Edward Island, including temporary foreign workers. I agree with that decision. We have to protect ourselves and our guests. But I also believe that we have to do more to make certain that islanders are able to follow the rules safely and without complete disruption for their families. For that reason, I would hope government will consider a program that helps young island students to safely self-isolate, which will come as a great relief to many families, individuals, and our entire community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions by members, starting with response to questions taken as notice. No? For our first question, I'll call on the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Premier has often said that he's not the same old, same old. And for those of us who entered island politics because we just couldn't take any more of the same old, those words were very welcome. But as the old saying goes, talk is cheap. And when it comes to rebuilding our island economy to be fairer, to be cleaner and more sustainable, a departure from the same old is desperately needed. A question to the Premier: in what way will the future island economy under your direction be fairer, cleaner and more sustainable?
Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that to begin, I would say that the Leader of the Opposition is not the same old either, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that, and I think it's one of the many things that I believe, at least in my heart, whether or not he does or not, that we have in common. I think what we're looking at in the future, Mr. Speaker, is a tremendous investment in clean technology, which is to support the cleaning of our environment and the improvement of our environment, while at the same time transitioning our economy, Mr. Speaker. So I think that's how it becomes cleaner and greener, to be honest. And I think as we continue to see the labor force transform, Mr. Speaker, I think that's how we have to focus on the fairer component, I would say, Mr. Speaker. But it is certainly my goal to be doing everything we can to be all of those things here in PEI, Mr. Speaker. And I think we have the ability to be not just a national leader, but a world leader in all of those regards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Premier, for that. Governments, of course, have been historically notoriously bad at guiding the economy and creating jobs, stimulating growth and sustainable development. For quite a long time now, the foundation of our economic growth here on PEI has been to increase our population. Various programs have been really successful in bringing new islanders to Prince Edward Island, but far less successful in actually keeping them here for any more than just a very short time. Nevertheless, the steady increase in our population has been a very powerful growth tool. With more people comes greater spending and consumer demand for goods and services, thereby increasing our GDP. To the Premier, the increasing diversity in our island population has been a joy to behold, but the lack of services to support these new islanders has not been. What are you going to do to invest sufficiently in our healthcare and education systems so that we can properly support our growing population?
Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I think that's a very good question, and I appreciate the Honourable Leader of the Opposition raising that issue. I do think, and I've said it many times in here, that The growth in our population has been a wonderful attribute for PEI, but it has come at a time when I don't think government has been as quick to make the investments that are needed. I view all islanders equally, Mr. Speaker, so I think when we talk about transitioning and improving health care and education in this province, that speaks to all islanders, Mr. Speaker, those who are rooted here through their history through the Mi'kmaq, or those who have chosen to come here in the last 2 or 3 years, Mr. Speaker. I do think population growth is a good thing. I do think, and we're trying hard as a government to make sure we recognize that the growth in population, although a good thing, needs to be matched with targeted investment in those areas, Mr. Speaker, and we are committed to doing that and open to any ideas from all members of this House and beyond to how we do that effectively, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Speaker. Many other countries have plans to substantially develop their economies in the face of declining populations. China and India come to mind here. Prince Edward Island could, with foresight and with political leadership and commitment, create a dynamic and resilient developing economy here on the island that doesn't only have to rely on population growth. I want to continue to welcome new islanders, of course, as we all do, but I also want us to grasp this opportunity to be innovative and visionary when designing our future economy. A question to the Premier. With a growing divide between wages and prices and more islanders struggling financially, what plans does your government have to protect our economy from the trends that are creating this situation?
Honourable Premier.
Well, I think, Mr. Speaker, that the first component is the recognition that our economy is transforming in front of us, and we have to be mindful of that, Mr. Speaker, and we have to be responsive to it, and we're trying to do that. At the same time, we have to also understand, and I think this being Earth Day and talking about 1970 and how far we've come, Mr. Speaker, I think, and I give full credit to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, and I have many times before, we have embraced as an island the economy and the environment as one issue, Mr. Speaker, and not dual issues anymore. And a lot of that's been the hard work by the Honourable Member, his party, and those who have believed in this long before many of the rest of us have, Mr. Speaker. So full kudos to them for that. But at the same time, I think it's the recognition that in that transformation and the reality of bringing these issues together are where the opportunities lie. That's where we're trying to make our targeted investments at the beginning, Mr. Speaker. And all of our success is going to be reliant upon the innovation and the creativity of our citizens, Mr. Speaker. More and more of them who are coming here are playing a role in that, as well as those who live here now. And I think it's an exciting time, and it's an opportunity I don't think we can afford to miss, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Speaker. For decades, many economists and a lot of Green politicians have lamented the disconnect between the values that drive a healthy and a strong economy and those that create a healthy and a strong society. As Mark Carney wonders in his recent book, Values Building a Better World for All, and I quote, how we went from living in a market economy to a market society, and we need to rethink and rebuild before it's too late, end quote. It's one thing for Green politicians to be saying stuff like this, but it's quite another for the former Governor of the Bank of Canada, and most recently, of course, of the Bank of England, to make a statement like that. To the Premier, leaders in Canada's financial sector are warning us to rethink and to rebuild with a different set of economic values that are more in alignment with the society we want to create. Do you agree with that?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I admit I haven't read Mr. Carney's book, and one of the comments during the leader's comment or lead up to the question were that he was a Liberal. And I think that still remains to be determined, Mr. Speaker, in terms of his actual politics. But having said all of that, Mr. Speaker, I don't think it is just Green politicians saying that anymore, Mr. Speaker. I'm the Progressive Conservative Premier, Mr. Speaker, and the party that I have always known and supported from a Progressive Conservative standpoint, Mr. Speaker, have always been leaders in the environment, and we continue to be. And I'm proud of that, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud of that. And I don't think we're that different as parties in this province of what we think, Mr. Speaker. But yes, I do believe that we can't continue on the same path that we have been on, either economically, Mr. Speaker, or environmentally. So while I wouldn't be as detailed and informed as Mr. Carney on the world market conditions from a PEI perspective, I think we need to be different, and that's the road we're heading down, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks again, Mr. Speaker. And I know our Premier to be a decent and a thoughtful man who cares deeply about this island and who loves his children dearly. And the combined challenges of COVID and climate change have brought into very sharp focus for many of us the purpose of our lives, what we're here for. And for those of us privileged to work in positions of leadership, as we all do in this House, the responsibility associated with this job can sometimes be quite overwhelming. To the Premier, are you willing to set aside the conventional economic thinking that Mark Carney warns us against in his book and consider charting a course for our island economy that is bold and innovative, one that will serve our island and its children for many decades to come?
The Honourable Premier.
To say, Mr. Speaker, I'm not an authority on world markets, and I'm not going to profess to be or try to be here in a 45-second response. I know from my history of PEI that we are innovators and that we are visionary in this, and we've done extremely well as a province in that regard. So I don't think I would like to abandon that creativity and that vision and that bold, innovative spirit, Mr. Speaker. I would like to double down on it. I would like to recognize, as we have as a government and what we have long before this government as a province have recognized, that we need to make a better, cleaner environment. And in doing so, there's a tremendous opportunity to transform and grow our economy, Mr. Speaker, and I'm all for that, and we're supporting that. I think we're one of the first governments to jump out in Canada to be a leader in that, and I want that not to just be words. I want that to be borne out in fact and success in the future, Mr. Speaker. So I think that my answer to that question is yes. I think the innovative spirit of Islanders, Mr. Speaker, has gotten us to this point, and I think we can double down on it and do amazing things here as a province in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Mr. Speaker, I've heard from some constituents in Summerside who have tried to use Maple to access health services and found the experience disappointing. It seems like a lot of people spend a lengthy amount of time in the wait queue only to be told to go to the ER or to the clinic. A question to the Health Minister: does Maple bill government for providing a Get Care recommendation? And if so, wouldn't that essentially be double charging the system?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, you look at the different initiatives that we have taken. We have to, as the Leader of the Opposition, as the Premier had reiterated here earlier this afternoon, we can't always look at same old, same old. We have looked at making use of Maple as an initiative that at the end of the day that we would hope would reduce wait times, Mr. Speaker. And that, at the end of the day, too, Mr. Speaker, is looking at how we can, with the resources that we have available, both financial and human and technologically, provide the very best services that we can for Islanders, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know what question the minister was answering, because what I asked specifically is, does Maple charge us for providing a Get Care recommendation? And if so, wouldn't that basically be double billing the system? If Maple then charges government and then the hospital charges government, aren't they being charged twice? I don't even know how to respond to your answer. Mr. Speaker, it seems like some services through this private company are only available to corporate partners, which basically means if you're willing to pay extra, you can get care, but for the base rate, you cannot. And that feels like a slippery slope to me. My question to the minister: are you worried that this is offering two tiers of service?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, Mr. Speaker, no, I'm absolutely not worried. We are not in a position, we don't want to put ourselves in a position at any point in time, Mr. Speaker, that we're offering two-tiered system of health care or any other programs across the province. Every Islander deserves equal access, equal representation with regard to the services that are provided. So, no, I am not concerned with that. With regard to the honourable member's first question, I certainly will go back to the department, get details and bring them back to the House. I don't have them right in front of me. I do appreciate the member bringing this forward, and I will endeavour to bring them back, if at all possible, by tomorrow at the latest, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member from Summerside Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd certainly appreciate that information coming back. It is a bit of a tricky situation because if people are willing to pay extra, they can access services, and the people who do not pay extra can't access services. I'm very concerned that that is two tiers of care by its very nature. Mr. Speaker, in addition to this site allows third-party cookies. So that means when people use Maple, they are then advertised to on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. My question to the minister, do you think this is appropriate, and how are we ensuring patient confidentiality with those files?
Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And yes, absolutely, patient confidentiality has to be at the forefront of any initiative that we do undertake, Mr. Speaker. You look at one of the initiatives that our government is actively working on is electronic medical records. It's one of the things that I put forward to the department too, though, is that we always have to ensure when we do make use of technology that the patient's confidential, any patient's confidential information, Mr. Speaker, is secure, and that whatever firewalls that are required are in place. But again, Mr. Speaker, I do appreciate the member bringing this forward when she references, that this may result in advertisement or requests and the like. Yes, I want to get information on that, and I do appreciate you bringing it forward, and I will bring details back on that as well, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yes, absolutely, this government is responsible for ensuring confidentiality and privacy within our healthcare system. They are also responsible for ensuring that Islanders know exactly how that confidentiality and privacy will be maintained, particularly when using a private company like Maple to access services. Mr. Speaker, clarifying issues of privacy and patient consent to share information, as well as length and method for saving patient information, should be clearly outlined in the contract between Maple and the PEI government. However, our office has been denied access to this contract. There was no response to my written question to the minister asking for the contract, and our FOIP was denied. Question to the Minister of Health, why are you refusing to be open and transparent about the details of the contract with Maple?
The honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And with regard to FOIP, yes, that is something that every individual, every Islander has the right, the ability to go down that road. Mr. Speaker, though, again, I would like to go back to my department, get the details as to the absolute reason, rationale for this, and more than happy to have that discussion with the honourable member. It's one of the things I think that right across the board that the three parties in this legislature have worked collaboratively together. It's been great to hear things that are brought forward that I may not have been aware of, and I think later, I would anticipate later this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, that we're going to see an excellent example of that collaboration between the member and myself. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Mr. Speaker, so that doesn't answer the question as to why we have been denied access to the contract with Maple. Mr. Speaker, one of the many dangerous things with contracting private companies to deliver public services in healthcare or anywhere else is that it ends up putting a barrier to transparency. Islanders can't get information from companies the same way they can access it from their government. My colleague from Summerside Wilmot just raised concerns about privacy and unequal access to health services that came from the private healthcare providers, which goes to show how important that transparency is. Question to the Premier. Are you concerned that providing health services in this way reduces transparency and may even create two tiers of healthcare service?
The honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I think as the Honourable Minister of Health has already indicated, I think we don't see that as maybe as members of the opposition see it. I think it's a service we're trying to provide, Mr. Speaker. As to why the details of the contract haven't been released. I don't know that, but I'll trust the minister, and I will work with him to endeavour to find out why, Mr. Speaker. But no, I think that it's the evolution, Mr. Speaker, of many different aspects of health that we have to talk about, and I think it's sort of essentially referenced in many of the questions that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition raised today, and how we have to look at new ways to do things in an ever-changing environment, Mr. Speaker, in an ever-changing world. And but I will work with the Minister to get the information back as to the contract status and what information can be released, if any. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's great news to hear the Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change tell us that low-income people can purchase electric cars for just $1. But our real goal, or another goal, should be to better utilize cars with every seat occupied, be they gas or electric. Question to the Minister. How are you ensuring that your subsidy results in fully occupied cars?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I represent the Progressive Conservative Party, not the Communist Party. I'm certainly not going to tell people that they have to get into the car with your neighbour and drive. Everybody has their own situation, but I know as we move forward down this road and we look at public transportation, and the Minister of Transportation talked about it during his budget estimates, on having a pilot, on going out to further distances, I think we're going to try to encourage people to get on a bus, because I think that's much more sensible than trying to force people into somebody else's car who they might not even like. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I completely agree that nobody should force anyone. But take our driver in Tignish we've been talking about. He might not be able to afford an electric car, even with your subsidy, but might if the car is shared with a neighbour who also gets a subsidy going in the same direction. This is called car sharing, and simultaneously makes electric cars more affordable and get less cars on the road. Question to the Minister. Can you make your subsidy apply to car sharing and so contribute to more electric cars that are fully occupied?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if we could extend this subsidy to that, but I have offered on numerous occasions and said publicly in this House that through our sustainable community model, if like-minded individuals want to come together and create a carpool for the community, that we would be quite on board to entertain that. And to date, none have come forward, but certainly if you have people that are interested in doing that, I would say reach out to us through our sustainable communities, and we'll look at working with them, and we'll look at how we can piece that together through financing to help make it a reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This might apply too to providing public transportation, which is really, really difficult and expensive in sparsely populated areas. So question to the Minister. Have you considered electric car sharing as a complementary and cheaper component of public transportation in outlying areas?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's probably more of a question for the Minister of Transportation. I know he has the file that's looking at how we move the masses around, and I'm sure they're looking at all angles. I know he mentioned yesterday that he has a professional working on the file, so I suspect that's probably a better point of question to him. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from O'Leary, Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If anyone in this House who has done any construction recently would know, the cost of building materials has skyrocketed here in PEI, as well as throughout Canada, Mr. Speaker. There are many reasons for these increases in prices. One, there's been a boom in both residential and commercial construction, once again here and elsewhere. Home repairs have been prioritized throughout this pandemic. Shortages in production capacity as a result of the pandemic. Cold weather in Texas, I even hear, is one of them. And the everlasting softwood lumber disputes, Mr. Speaker. Question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing. What has the government done to respond to the large increases in construction costs over the last year? It's an easy one.
The honourable member, Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So one thing that I've done since I became minister is first I've met with the Home Builders Association, of course, who represents builders who are dealing with these costs, and that indeed was one of the items on their agenda. And it's something that I'm working, we have to work across departments to address this, with the Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture, Minister of Finance, and Minister of Planning, and wherever else. So we're aware of the problem. We're looking at it. We're meeting with the people most impacted. We're identifying their exact concerns and formulating a plan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Larry-Inverness.
Mr. Speaker, well, that's good. He's having some meetings. As part of the 2021 budget, I'll even boast a bit on the government side. You currently, that was debated in the House, we are seeing home repair funding for seniors and persons with disabilities doubled. But as we read a little closer, it sounds good, the double part, but it's only about $200,000 a year each for the next 3 years, Mr. Speaker. While that's a start, we have begun hearing from Islanders stating that these program increases will not offset the large increases in construction materials. In fact, I've had one constituent come to me and says, the increases barely cost buy you more than a few sheets of plywood and a bag of screws, Mr. Speaker. We know lumber costs in Atlantic Canada are 2 and sometimes cases double and much more expensive than they were before than it was prior to the pandemic. Question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing. Will you consider further increasing these home repair grants to ensure the increases can actually be a benefit to Islanders with improving their homes so they won't have to be out looking for a rent somewhere else, Mr. Speaker?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, of course, the Senior Safe at Home program, the Seniors Home Repair program, and the PEI Home Renovation program are ones that we are, as you mentioned, over the next 3 years, we're going to be increasing them by a third so that they're doubled over the next 3 years. And Mr. Speaker, we're here to help Islanders. We're here to make sure that these programs offer them what they need to make the program work. And so if we need to give them more funding because building materials have gone up, yes, Mr. Speaker, we'll do just that. Thank you.
Larry-Inverness for second supplementary.
But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, constituents are telling me they go get quotes, they submit the applications. The time the application comes back, the quotes are outdated and no good, Mr. Speaker. It needs to be improved somewhat. So this certainly makes the applicant in a very precarious situation to have to then go back and get new quotes again and go through the whole process once again. Mr. Minister, will you commit to hiring more staff to fast-tracking the application process period for these programs before the quotes are outdated?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And indeed, this is a problem, and it's a problem that that government faces as well when we put out tenders, and then the costs go up, and you know, you start a project and you have a budget. Then at the end of the project, that budget is different. And Mr. Speaker, it's something we're well aware of. In fact, I think we need to look at those programs even on a more deeper level, not just about you know, the quotes. And I want to look at and I want to review those programs to make sure they're as efficient as possible, they're as easy as possible, especially for seniors to apply to. And it's something I was just talking to my Deputy Minister about the other day, and something that I hope to take an action on in the near future. Thank you very much.
Larry-Inverness.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thinking about something and doing something is totally different, Mr. Speaker. Let's get some people that we can get these approvals done so the quotes aren't outdated, Mr. Speaker. But the primary goal is always to make sure people can remain in their own home, provided it is safe to do so. When people can stay in their homes longer, they also remain members of our community and often enjoy the assistance of the established support systems out there. We are also experiencing a housing crisis in PEI, and an influx of individuals leaving their homes to go to apartments would further exacerbate this program. Minister of Social Development and Housing, are you concerned more Islanders leaving their homes due to the inability to utilize home repair programs could worsen the housing crisis?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So right now, we're in a time where the cost of materials is going up, the cost of land is going up. It's a large issue. It goes across multiple departments, and I'm working with my fellow ministers to come up with a plan to address this across the housing continuum. And the contribution of the home repair programs to people having to go rent, I mean, is one small component of that, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not going to stand up here and say this is an easy problem, something we can fix overnight. But Mr. Speaker, one of the things is we're working within the guidelines of CMHC, and if you look at their guidelines and what they classify as affordable housing, you know, 30% of household income, we're in a position where we're seeing, you know, higher monthly amounts as being acceptable under their guidelines, and it's a challenging file, and it's something that we have to work closely with Islanders on to set proper expectations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Larry-Inverness.
Minister, Islanders are expecting results here. They're expecting to be able to get their decisions made fairly quickly so they can get their home repairs done so they can stay in their homes. Mr. Speaker, we know government is trying to address these issues, and they have developed different partnerships with developers, and even government has its own affordable housing programs. The rising cost of materials has led to construction budgets increasing exponentially. And in some cases, we have seen the results of delayed or even cancelled projects. I know of people in my riding, Mr. Speaker, that have stopped construction. They just can't continue on. Question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing. Have any government-owned or government-partnered affordable housing projects been delayed or halted as a result of the rising costs of materials?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Speaker. As far as I know, all of our affordable housing development program projects are still moving ahead as scheduled. As you well know, right now the way the program works is we offer developers $45,000 per unit upfront capital costs, and up to half of the units in a particular complex that they can apply to through the AHDP, Affordable Housing Development Plan. And Mr. Speaker, this again is a conversation that I've had with the department over the last month or so. Is that $45,000 enough, given the rising costs of developing, and do we need to change that? And Mr. Speaker, as this economy changes, we have to react, and we're going to react, and we're reviewing that right now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Larry Inverness, your second supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope this minister looks at his budget estimates haven't been on there yet, that we'll see a significant increase in the budget estimates that will reflect this and get these housing issues dealt with, Mr. Speaker. We certainly know the minister's previous comments that he believes certain segments of our population are encouraged to be victims. The reality is we do have people in PEI who are victims of this housing crisis. I know I have a constituent that, once again, can't find a place to stay. Their children are in school at the Ellerslie Elementary School and they can't find a place. The reality is that we have to try to help these people, Mr. Speaker. The government must be doing everything possible to ensure Islanders have access to the housing they can afford. Not everyone has offshore bank accounts, or in this instance, for instance, in Singapore. We have to help them deal through this situation. Question to the Minister. With the increase of building supplies, will you commit to further offering home repair grants to keep up with the rising construction costs to help Islanders in an effort to keep people in their homes that they currently are?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I mean, just like all MLAs in this House, I'm very acutely aware of these problems that exist right now with the rising cost of housing and making it inaccessible for people. And Mr. Speaker, in the Department of Social Development and Housing, the people, the staff that work there, in housing in particular, are very passionate about solving these problems and helping people. And Mr. Speaker, we're going to find solutions to these problems. We're going to put the help in place so that people will have the quality of homes to live in that they need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Cornwall, Meadowbanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, question to the Finance Minister. Last August, the Minister's Department received an email from a former head of Atlantic Lotto, Chris Keevil, and I will table that later. I will note in passing that Mr. Keevil has left his position under fairly mysterious circumstances. He talks about the secretive pandemic launch of a home gambling program in New Brunswick and seems quite excited by his own version of success. In fact, he mentions the heroic efforts of ALC to start the home gambling program and finishes his email with the following sentence, and I quote, "This is big." My question to the Minister, does she agree with Mr. Keevil, and is she also enthusiastic about the big decision?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I really can't comment on Mr. Keevil's reasoning behind that. It's something that's been discussed with the other 3 Atlantic provinces. We've heard about this for a number of years. It's something that 90% of Canadians have the ability to do, is to access regulated gaming in their province, and it's something that we as Prince Edward Islanders right now are looking at as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cornwall, Meadowbanks.
In November email, Atlantic Lotto seemed very pleased that they had launched their home gambling with practically no media attention. I guess a global pandemic seemed like a convenient time to perhaps take most vulnerable people and put them in a circumstance that it's not wanted. In fact, the lack of media attention to home gambling formed part of Atlantic Lotto's recommendation to PEI. to move ahead with our own program. And I will table that document as well. We all know Cabinet approved this program in days just before Christmas. Was this all part of a plan to keep these matters out of sight of Atlantic Canadian media?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. An honourable member, third party mentioned that this was a scheme. Honourable member, this came to Cabinet for full disclosure, to be open and transparent for Islanders. It's not like the scheme of the previous government for GeoSweep and e-gaming that never went to an order in council, was not even known about by Islanders until it blew up in the media. So, honourable member, we are talking about Atlantic Lottery Corporation here. It's owned by the 3 provinces. We are going to do what's right for Islanders, and I continue to stand by that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks for second supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'll remind the honourable member that I don't think anything was ever proven in e-gaming through the RCMP or third parties. So, Mr. Speaker, when she says we're going to do what's in the best interest of Islanders, I hope the honourable member is saying all Islanders. I hope the honourable member is actually saying those people that have addiction and mental health issues because of gaming. Mr. Speaker, that's who she's talking about. It's in their platform. We're about people. So, Mr. Speaker, in New Brunswick, it says the November email also includes reference to Atlantic Lotto emailing $10 vouchers to opt into players who have not wagered yet. Now, we've heard the minister get up time and time again and says, they're already playing. They're already playing. Is this part of the plan here to attract people who haven't gambled yet?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I will continue to say that this is to protect Islanders, not exploit them. Honourable member, we collect taxes for liquor, for alcohol, for tobacco, for cannabis. All those monies go back into the coffers of Prince Edward Island, and I will commit to the House today that any revenue from online gaming will go back into mental health and addictions. We are doing this for the protection and the safety and health of Islanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Morel Donut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this being Earth Day, I really want to highlight soil health in Prince Edward Island. 35% of the world's land cover is dominated by agriculture, Mr. Speaker, and in Prince Edward Island, that's actually higher. It's 42.5%, or almost 600,000 acres. Mr. Speaker, there was a recent article in The Guardian that highlighted some of the progress made in recent years to stop the decline of soil organic matter, which is a key indicator, of course, of soil health. Also, the tracking of soil health is so vitally important here in Prince Edward Island. A question to the Minister of Agriculture and Land. The Soil First Farming Initiative we talked about a lot during budget estimates. How are you going to promote and engage many more farming operations here in Prince Edward Island on this potentially very successful program?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Land.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's great to get an agriculture question today on Earth Day, Mr. Speaker. And we, in the budget estimates, we did talk a lot about soil first farming, Mr. Speaker, and that's something that I called a movement, and it's a movement that's happening on this island, Mr. Speaker. Our soil is finally turned the corner, Mr. Speaker, where organic matter has started to turn to the proper way, Mr. Speaker, and I'm proud to take on this challenge to support our agriculture industry because they need our support, Mr. Speaker. It's a movement where it's in a long-term investment into their soil, Mr. Speaker. It costs a lot of money up front, but it's a long-term investment, and the farmers here on Prince Edward Island are willing to make it. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Morel Donut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, many factors contributed to the decline in soil health here in PEI. Erosion, tillage practices, and certainly the ill-fated decision by the former government to walk away from supporting the livestock industry, Mr. Speaker. We all remember that. Much of the positive change being measured is due to improved practice by farmers to protect soil health, which is commendable. We hear a lot of talk about ways to incentivize good behavior, Mr. Speaker, and better soil health practices. One way that gets constantly tossed around is to financially support those farmers who are going the extra mile. A question again to the Minister of Agriculture. What specifically are we going to do to support those that are already going the extra mile to help adopt good soil health practices?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Land.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the old saying is to lead with a carrot instead of a stick, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we have to do. We have to reward our farmers that are doing a tremendous job, Mr. Speaker, because they are laying the pathway for the next generation, Speaker. So when we talk about supporting our farmers, it's through innovation, Mr. Speaker. We have new low-till equipment, Mr. Speaker. We have no-till equipment, Mr. Speaker. All this innovation, Mr. Speaker, is guiding the path to healthier soils and protecting our soil and sequestering carbon, Mr. Speaker. It's all laid out there, Mr. Speaker, and we're doing more stewardship programs with structures, winter cover crops. We're supporting our farmers through our CAP program on all that, Mr. Speaker. And I'm quite proud of how the farmers have taken this on, Mr. Speaker, and they are owning it and they want to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member from Morale Donny, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly soil health has a whole multiplying factors, and the Minister and I have talked about this before, but yeah, you're seeing much more manure in fields these days, Mr. Speaker, these past couple of years, and it's exciting to see. Improving our soil health gives it's a whole bunch of things, Mr. Speaker. It's better production, it's natural inputs into our soil as well, but it also helps, Mr. Speaker, increase the carbon sequestration, which is helping reach our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, Mr. Speaker. A question to the Minister of Climate Change. Many farmers are wanting to increase that organic matter in their soil. How far along are we into investigating with Island Waste Management Corporation the viability of using our compost that we have into our organic material in our farmland, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know there's a study ongoing right now that includes both that and our dead stock, because the dead stock program now currently has all dead stock shipped to Quebec, which is quite expensive for the farmers. So we're looking at what the possibility would be to have a biodigester kind of idea for that, and as well for IWMC and their compost. But even more recently, with discussions with the PEI Federation of Agriculture, there's been some interest expressed with farmers at exploring their own option, particularly dairy farmers who would have large enough herds that would have enough manure that they could operate with it. And we're basically telling them, as any of these farmers who think they have the organic material and want to explore what those options would be on a small scale, even for their own farm, that we will be 100% there to help them do that, because we think it's important to help farmers transition over to this new economy that we're in. And I know a lot of them are very forward thinking, and I've spoke to a number of them over the past 10 or 15 days, and it's amazing what farmers are doing here in Prince Edward Island that Islanders don't already know what they're doing, and they may be the most environmental people that I know and that I met with today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Housing Hub was a foundational part of the 2018 housing strategy, but it has had no leadership, no public or web presence, and very little data has ever come out of it. In fact, it's disappeared from sight and been rolled into the existing department structure. We can't create good policy if we don't have good data to draw from, and the Housing Hub was supposed to be that foundational part of the strategy, to be the source of data for housing for the government and indeed for all islanders. For example, we've only recently started getting the numbers of islanders on the housing registry, which is pretty critical for identifying the need that's out there. Question to the Minister for Social Development and Housing. How does your department make funding and policy decisions on housing if you don't do it based on evidence or data?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So when it comes to making any decisions that are evidence-based, of course, data is critical. And collecting the data we need to make our decisions in the Department of Social Development and Housing is one of our priorities, really. The housing registries were mentioned, and we committed to publishing those on the web, and I expect that was going to happen within the next week or so, and you're going to be able to see those numbers openly and transparently. And Mr. Speaker, we're also working to collect data across the housing continuum, and it's very challenging in some areas, in particular when it comes to homelessness. So, Mr. Speaker, we're working with the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. We're working with Stats Canada, but we're also working as part of federal programs like Reaching Home. And of course, they have that coordinated access portion, Mr. Speaker, as well as their HIFIS system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member from Charlottetown, Belvedere, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is important to be able to have accurate access, and I know the Minister is probably familiar with it. Until recently, there were actually 13 different housing registries in PEI that didn't talk to each other. So I'm hopeful that when we're publishing that data, that's going to be a single housing registry. Will the Minister commit to making and providing a simple, single point of contact for islanders who are in need of housing? Because, Minister, right now, that's another barrier.
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So when it comes to islanders contacting the department for housing needs, in fact, we have the emergency shelter line, which is a single point of contact for emergency shelter. We also can use 211, which is a great service that it's through the United Way that comes in, and they will help you navigate directly to the right spot in government, and that's a single point of access as well. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to look more into this problem because, in my estimation, we do a good job when it comes to giving islanders an access into government. I know that the administrators in my office field those calls, they track them, they make sure they go out to the right places in the department, and overall, as a team, they do a fantastic job. So, Mr. Speaker, this is one I will follow up on, but I believe we're in a good spot. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
End of question period. Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise here on Earth Day to announce the government's environmental awards. Our government provides annual environmental awards to individuals, organizations, and school groups that deserve special recognition for their environmental efforts. The Environmental Advisory Committee reviews nominations and picks winners each year. To be eligible for an award, an individual, organization, or school must have been instrumental in the following: identifying, reducing, solving, or avoiding an environmental problem, demonstrating consistently responsible environmental management practices, and or promoting public awareness, understanding, and active concern for the enhancement and protection of the environment. The winning school receives $3,000 along with an engraved wooden plaque. In the other two categories, business and individuals, the winners receive engraved wooden plaques. The Environmental Advisory Council is pleased to announce the following winners for 2021. Charlottetown Rural High School for their outdoor classroom project, Happy Oceans Community Group for advocating for alternative solutions to plastic pollution such as single-use plastic waste, and Eric Edward for his work as an environmental educator at McPhail Woods and caring for PEI Forest. These individuals and groups have shown their commitment to make our island a better place. Congratulations to the winners. I hope all islanders will follow this example and take action in their own lives and work together to lessen the impact of the environment and help reach our net zero goals. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Mr. Speaker, it's also a pleasure to rise and congratulate the winners of this wonderful award. I certainly do not envy the work of the Environmental Advisory Committee in having to select winners from all of the various applications that would come forward, because I can only imagine that there were some incredible schools, incredible organizations, and incredible individuals. Not an easy job to select your winners for sure, but I would also like to echo what the Minister said, congratulate the winners. I think this is a fantastic initiative and we need to see more celebrating the wonderful successes on PEI for our environmental leaders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and congratulate the very deserving honours on their environmental awards. These awards are given to deserving individuals, groups, or groups who have worked hard to protect, preserve, and enhance our environment here on PEI. This could be awarded to an individual, a business, an organization, a school, and many other potential recipients. Awards like this are a great way to recognize the accomplishments and efforts of islanders who are doing their part to reduce climate change. To all the recipients and to those, I wish you congratulations and thank you for your efforts improving our island environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
End of statements. Presenting and receiving petitions. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Member, Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg to table due to its format a petition containing 79 signatures asking for the Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy to review the traffic on Highway 10 due to the amount of commercial traffic, and there has been no safe shoulders to walk or bike on. This is seconded by the member from Montague-Kilmere.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from O'Leary Inverness, third party whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by leave of this House, I beg to table written questions seeking Atlantic Lottery Corporation's communication plan, which is based on a reactive approach, as noted in the August 5th memo to the Minister of Finance. And I move, seconded by the Leader of the third party, that the said document be received and do not lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from O'Leary Inverness, third party whip.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to leave this House. I beg to table a written question seeking copies of the key messaging prepared by the Atlantic Lottery Corporation to respond to media requests regarding the online gaming plan, and I move it, seconded by the member from Charlottetown West Royal, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Charlottetown West Royalty.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to this House. I beg leave that the written question seeking the prepared questions and answers to be used by ALC Customer Care Center, and I move, seconded by Cornwall Meadowbank, that the said document now be received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by leave of this House, I beg leave to table written questions seeking information on RFP PEIG 5657 for Operation Isolation, which was cancelled earlier this month. And I move, seconded by Tignis Palmer Road.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Tignis Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg to table written questions seeking information on whether the PEI government itself or PEI-owned housing corporation obtained rapid housing initiative. And I move, seconded by O'Leary Inverness, the said document do now be received and lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table provincial government housing-related information for the Tignish area, and I move that the document be received and do lay on the table, seconded by the Minister of Health.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, third party House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg to leave emails displaying excitement regarding expansion of online gambling service by ALC officials follow the New Brunswick launch last August. Seconded by O'Leary Inverness.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, third party House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table a memo presented to the Minister of Finance outlining financial success of New Brunswick online gaming programs, recommending PEI follow suit, and I move, seconded by O'Leary Inverness.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, third party House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table written questions seeking all correspondence sent to all from Department of Finance officials, including the Minister, from October 22nd, 2020 to January 8th, 2021. And I move, seconded by Leader of the third party.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, third party House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table written questions seeking all correspondence sent to all by anyone representing Executive Council and/or the Premier's office from October 22nd, 2020 to January 8, 2021. Leader of the third party, and I move, seconded by the Leader of the third party. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall it carry?
Thank you.
Is that it? Did I miss anyone tabling the documents? Okay. Reports by committees. The Honourable Member from Tignish. Sorry. What? The Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Standing Committee on Legislative Assembly Management and the following receipt of the unanimous report of the committee regarding Bill 108 yesterday, I move, seconded by the Honourable Member from Mermaid Stratford, that the report of the committee be now adopted. Recommendation While this bill does have implications on the operations of the Legislative Assembly, the committee recognizes that should the House decide to pass a bill like this, the committee will determine how to exercise its powers and duties as outlined in the rules of the Legislative Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall anybody speak to his report? No? Shall it carry?
Carry.
Honourable member from Charlottetown, West Royalton.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Standing Committee on Health and Social Development, I beg leave to introduce the second report of the said committee entitled Prince Edward Island Human Rights Commission. I move, seconded by the Honourable Member from O'Leary-Inverness, that the report be now received and do lie on the table. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 110-5 of the Rules of the Legislative Assembly, I'll be moving the motion for adoption of the report on Friday, April 23rd of this year.
Seconder?
O'Leary-Inverness.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
Introduction of government bills. Government motions. Orders of the day. Government. The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Premier, that the first order of the day be now read.
Shall carry.
Carry.
Order number 1, consideration of the estimates in committee.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Premier, that this House do now resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration grant of supplies with Her Majesty.
Shall carry. The Honourable Member from Pomerode, Deputy Speaker, to chair the Committee of the Whole, please.
The House is now in a committee of the whole House to consider the grant of supply to Her Majesty. A request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Granted. Honourable members, we are on page 132, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. The section Confederation Trail Maintenance has been read and is presently under debate. Good afternoon. Would you please state your name and position for answers?
Sure. Wendy McDonald, Director of Finance and Human Resources for the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Wendy, and welcome.
Thank you.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, you mentioned yesterday that you'd bring back to the House dates when the bridge of the Confederation Trail between Morel and St. Peters would be, the work there would be starting and finishing. Do you have that information?
Yeah, actually, Honourable Member, I had a meeting with some of the directors this morning, and they're putting that together for me. They're just trying to tighten up the timeline, so it's as exact as it can be for you.
Okay.
Leader of the Opposition.
Any sense when that will be brought back to the House, Minister?
Should have it for you tomorrow.
Fantastic.
Leader of the Opposition.
I'm good, thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question regarding the trail. Who protects the trail from intrusion by other departments or cities, for that matter? There's currently a plan out for, I think, the Parkdale section of Charlottetown, and they propose that an additional road right next to the Towers Road cross the trail. In my opinion, that degrades the trail. My question is, that your department protects the integrity of the trail against such intrusions?
Sure. Yep, so that would fall under our department and the planning division, working with the municipalities and the developers.
Charlottetown Brighton?
So are you indeed standing up and telling it's inappropriate to have another crossing right next to one that exists already?
Honourable member, typically what would happen, there would be public meetings hosted by the municipality and the developer that's proposing any of these changes, and the public would have an opportunity to speak up then at that point.
Charlottetown Brighton?
I understand that, and I've been following that. There's great dissatisfaction with everyone of the way this is being approached. I'm asking, who's going to champion the trail? Are you going to do that? Are you going to stand up and speak against the crossing?
So, honourable member, again, we work with municipalities, we work with developers, we work in the best interest of the general public to ensure any future development meets all aspects of safety. Our main concern in the Department of Transportation Infrastructure is safety.
Charlottetown Brighton?
Okay, thanks. So, from your answer, as far as I can understand, there isn't a champion in your department for the nature trail, but thank you. I'm good.
Leader of the third party.
There was some discussion a while back with the ATV clubs wanting to cross the trail. Could you give us an update on that? Were they successful in their crossings, and where's that going?
That's still being looked at. There's no final decisions have been made on that at this time.
Okay, so there hasn't been any permission to go across on the trails?
That's correct.
Leader of the third party? Okay.
That's it.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thanks, Chair. So, Minister, the section from the Mount Herbert Trail to Fullerton's Marsh, I know it was started last year. The road down to it was completed. Do you know when that's going to be fully completed and operational?
I can bring that back for you, honourable member.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. And when they were in preparation, that Mount Herbert Road was widened obviously because there's going to be cycling on that road. However, it was just the shoulders, not the whole road skimmed. It was just the shoulders. Is there plans, do you know, because there's a lip in between and it's probably growing with the lifting and that kind of thing. Once that's all done, do you foresee that there'll be maintenance done in order to complete the whole project around the road part as well?
And so, honourable member, I'll commit to bringing back all of the information with regards to that project, and so that you know exactly what's happening and where and when.
Perfect. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
You're welcome. Charlottetown Winslow.
Thank you, Chair. Just something that was brought to my attention by a constituent. I'm not sure if your department, I believe they may have had a chance to look at it, but is the Confederation Trail where it crosses the number 2 highway just past Campbell Road in Winslow. I'm not sure if your department has had a chance to look at that, or if essentially if it has been brought to the department's attention before.
I'm not familiar with the section, honourable member, the Campbell Road. I'd have to have a map in front of me.
Okay, it's on the number 2 highway just past Campbell Road as you're heading out of Charlottetown, further into Winslow. I just wanted to be on the record as a constituent had asked me if the department would look into, just because it is a highway, and it is where the Confederation Trail cuts back over towards Lower Malpeque Road.
Okay, I'll reach into the department and find out where we're at on that, honourable member, and bring that back to you.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. That's good. Thank you, Chair.
Shall the section carry?
Carry.
Total highway maintenance operations, $54,096,300. Shall it carry? Public Works and Planning. Public Works Operation Administration. Appropriations provided for division, staffing, materials, and travel for administrative, supervisory, and trade staff in building maintenance and accommodations. Administration, $21,100. Equipment, $3,000. Material, supplies, and services, $1,847,400. Salaries, $1,172,000. Travel and training, $33,500. Total Public Works Operation Administration, $3,077,000. Shall the section carry? Pardon me? Okay. Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if you could tell me what the government's objective is with regard to maintenance spending. Is the goal to keep the spending as low as possible?
Our goal is always to keep our spend as low as possible.
Charlottetown, Brighton.
So, to that extent, are you trying to cut spending that unnecessary for heating, cooling, and power with the proper action, even though it might actually temporarily increase spending?
No, Honourable Member, I guess what I'm saying is we always want to make sure our expenditures are kept in line, but there is always maintenance that has to be conducted. If you don't do the necessary maintenance, you end up falling behind, and then it's going to cost you more in the long run. No different than your home.
Charlottetown, Brighton.
Yeah, I think the word you're looking for is deferred maintenance, which is a bad thing. But yep. I was more thinking in terms of actually upgrades, like just to take an example we were talking about, to bring it up to net zero. To what extent are you looking at investing in the long term, reducing expenditures?
Well, again, as I said previously, with regards to net zero ready, that's the focus on all of our new builds, existing facilities where we need to do upgrades. If there's a ventilation system that has to be replaced, we're obviously going to replace it with something that's more modern and energy efficient.
Charlottetown, Brighton.
But do you have thank you, Chair. I guess my question is, do you have a concerted effort to look at the options of actually making the buildings net zero or meet net zero standards?
Yeah, so Honourable Member, within the department there would be a strategy and a plan that's focused on all of our buildings, and I can certainly go into the department, see what they're, and bring that plan back for you.
Charlottetown, Brighton.
Okay, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Shall the section carry?
Carry.
Direct building maintenance. Appropriations provided for regular maintenance, janitorial services, power, heat, and water to provincial government buildings. Administration, $1,214,400. Equipment, $2,000. Material, supplies, and services, $5,080,000. Professional services, $463,100. Salaries, $2,054,700. Travel and training, $4,500. Total direct building maintenance, $8,818,700. Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I'm just wondering, this would be where all the janitorial staff would be out of, right, the resourcing up for it? Mm-hmm. Is that correct? So I've got two questions around that. First of all, the hiring practice for staffing, maintenance for the buildings around all the government buildings. How are those jobs posted online and go through the like a standard hiring process?
Yes, all these jobs would be posted through the Public Service Commission, and the hiring would be done through
Mermaid Stratford. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Minister. The other concern I've received from a couple constituents is around the education requirements. So currently today, this is similar to bus drivers, and we've had this conversation in the House before. So around requiring grade 12 education or GED, around bus drivers, it would be if you had a clean driving record for 40 years, but you may not have completed your grade 12. Does that really impact your ability to, drive students, take care of them, and be a good guardian of them? Same thing with the janitorial staff. Is grade 12 required? Is that a criteria that you're willing to look at to see if that's a minimum requirement that can be reviewed?
I would have to go back and bring that information back to you, Honourable Member.
Mermaid Stratford.
I'd appreciate that because, you know, there is a certain population out there that, you know, looking at continuing education in order to get those positions, but again, not guarantee the positions. Obviously, they have to apply for it, but automatically they're disqualified because of maybe not having finished grade 12. And it would just be a really good stepping stone at some point. Like the government looks at those criteria, the minimum education criteria to see if it's really required for that job position in order to open it up to a broader amount of people that could have the skill set to do it, and just education holding them back. So I appreciate it if you could take that back.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Honourable Member.
Okay, thank you.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. I've been asking a few questions on air ventilation systems and what COVID has done to buildings across our province. In this section, have you looked at, has there been any air maintenance quality tests done recently with our provincial government buildings?
All of our buildings are continually monitored for air quality and safety, particularly for our employees that are working in those buildings.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Sorry, Chair. Has there been a lens put on that because of COVID or at all, or any kind of further discussion about air quality due to what's happening, some of the conversations happening nationally across the country about air quality in those buildings?
Well, I mean, the pandemic certainly has put an additional lens on many things, and air quality in buildings would be one. The federal government has just recently announced a funding program for just that as well. So we have a very, very capable engineering staff within our department that continually monitors this, and if there was an issue in a particular building, it would be addressed appropriately, immediately.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Well, it's good to hear, and the staff worked pretty hard. And, so I'm just saying, because the buildings they're fairly old, they're aging. Could you bring back the last time any air quality tests were done in those buildings? Is there any reports, or do you have internal reports about that?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a report there, and I'd be more than happy to bring that back.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Thank you, Chair.
Charlottetown Belvedere? Oh, sorry, Charlottetown Brighton?
Excuse me, Chair, are we still in maintenance, or did we move to accommodations?
No, we're still in maintenance.
Okay, so my question is the next
section. Is in the next section? Okay. Shall the section carry?
Okay.
I heard someone say chair. Okay. Accommodations, appropriations provided for lease and rental costs, janitorial services, power, heat, and water costs for leased accommodations. Administration, $10,256,600. Material, supplies, and services, $431,600. Professional services, $233,200. Salary, $17,500. Total accommodations, $10,938,900. Charlottetown Brighton?
Thank you, Chair. So why has the administration line gone up by nearly $1 million?
So the increase in the current budget increase would be reflective of increased costs associated with office rent for leased buildings during the fiscal year.
Charlottetown Belvedere, Brighton?
Oh, so the 10 million includes everything, like rent?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Chair. So what does the government do to ensure that we get a good value for the money we spent on these leased accommodation?
We have some pretty amazing staff that look after negotiating lease contracts with private property owners. Typically we're looking at anywhere from a 5-year lease to a 10-year lease, and we get an exceptional rate per square foot as compared to, say, somebody else that's going in to look maybe lease for 1 year or 2 year. Again, just the sheer volume of the lease and the contracts that we have across the island. We're a very sought after tenant.
Oh, yeah.
I should say, and so therefore we do have the leverage to get the best square footage price that is possible. Just an example, we have 74 locations, and that represents 580,000 square feet of property across PEI.
Charlottetown Brighton?
I think the leases used to be considered plums. I don't know if that's the case anymore. Does it include liquor stores, for instance?
There would be some that would be liquor stores yet. No? Sorry, Wendy?
The liquor stores fall under PEI Liquor Control Commission.
Okay, yeah, because it comes under a Crown Corp.
Yes.
Yeah,
That makes
sorry.
Charlottetown Brighton?
That makes perfect sense. So do you get in, it's kind of a repeat question, do you get involved in the energy efficiency? Is that something you leave to the hands of the landlord, or do you pay your own power and heat, for instance?
Perhaps you would have that here.
I can speak to that. Some of the leases are all-inclusive, rent, heat, lights, everything in. Other ones, a few of them have that you pay the bill separately, but the majority of them are all in.
Charlottetown Brighton?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Charlotte Section Carey?
Carey.
Planning and building construction, appropriations provided for staff and related services and providing planning and building construction services to departmental operations. Administration, $12,200. Material supplies and services, $120,500. Professional services, $110,000. Salaries, $1,238,900. Travel and training, $46,000. Total planning and building construction, $1,527,600. Summerside South Drive.
Yeah, there's a biomass review for $8,100 in the big book there. What did this look at and can you table?
So we're just going to find that here for you. Do you have it, Wendy?
Yeah. The biomass review is performed by Stantec. That's the details that I have. I don't have the other information with me.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. Can we get that report review tabled?
Yep, we'd certainly take a look at that for you.
Great.
Summerside South Drive. Charlotte Section Carey. Total public works and planning, $24,362,200. Charlotte Carey.
Carey.
Capital Project Division, traffic operations, appropriations provided for staffing, materials, equipment, and services for highway signage, pavement line markings, traffic control lights, and illumination. Administration, $30,600. Equipment, $7,300. Material supplies and services, $1,322,100. Professional services, $7,500. Salaries, $2,314,200. Travel and training, $47,100. Total traffic operations, $3,728,800. Charlotte Section Carey. Capital Projects Administration, appropriations provided for the Office of the Chief Engineer for administration and supervisory staff of the highway capital projects. Administration, $78,200. Equipment, $28,800. Material supplies and services, $36,500. Professional services, $42,000. Salaries, $2,569,000. Travel and training, $50,900. Total capital projects administration, $2,805,400. Summerside South Drive.
Chair, we overspent on salaries by about $800,000, but that's expected to come back down this year. Why was this up last year?
I believe it had a lot to do with just the amount of capital projects that we had on the go. We had a record year.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. That was the next question. Was it due to all extra paving? I guess the answer is yes. Thank you.
Okay, that's it. Okay. Charlotte Section Carey. Design appropriations provided for staffing, materials, equipment, and travel for design. Administration, $9,000. Equipment, $500. Material supplies and services, $5,500. Professional services, $4,800. Salary, $647,100. Travel and training, $10,300. Total design, $677,200. Charlotte Section Carey. Bridge maintenance, appropriations provided for staffing, materials, travel, and services to maintain small bridges. Administration, $5,200. Material supplies and services, $1,464,500. Professional services, $420,000. Salaries, $560,600. Travel and training, $9,600. Total bridge maintenance, $2,459,900. O'Leary and Vance.
Hey, Minister, I usually always ask these same questions on these same 4 bridges for an update, but maybe I'll start off with the Stephen Road Bridge in West Point. That previous minister had said it was going to be under construction. The engineer said it was going to be done, but in the end it hasn't been done. And it's an issue with farmers having to drive around quite a ways to get to their fields. It's not. I know it's not an overly busy bridge or anything of that nature, and I don't think it's a big project. But is there any update on that one? And maybe you don't know, and that's fair.
I can certainly go into the department and get an update for you on that and bring it back, Honourable Member.
And the other one is the Biddeford Bridge. It's one that I know there were some plans and designs. They had to reroute a road, highly traveled bridge. It's on Route 12, and there have been some incidents at the bridge as well. Once again, I was told it was going to be delayed till maybe another year or more, but now I'm told it may even be into 2025 before it's going to be done. So I wouldn't mind maybe a more update with the new minister on that one. The other two, the Iron Bridge, I did actually go to the Iron Bridge this spring, and it's really gone. And the Iron Bridge is on Mendig Road.
Literally?
It's there, but you can't get, get over it. Yeah, it's pretty well washed out on both sides of the bridge. And once again, not a highly used bridge at all, but still there's properties on the other side of the bridge, so I get some of the landowners inquiring that it's getting more unsafe all the time to try to get across it. Okay. And the other is the Gaines Creek Bridge. I don't know how bad that one is, but the one landowner next door to it seems to think it's not as good as it should be. So I wouldn't mind getting an update on all 4 of those bridges to maybe what the plan is for them moving forward. Sure. I'm not expecting them all to be done this year or anything of that nature, but I do get questions as an MLA for the area. And even if I go back to the Biddeford Bridge, it's in the municipality of Central Prince, and they seem to always be asking me for an update on it. And I just want to be accurate with them, that's all.
Yep. Certainly. So we'll bring that back so that we can provide you with the accurate information.
O'Leary Inverness.
I appreciate that, Minister. That's all.
Yeah.
Thanks. Summerside South Drive.
Chair, there's lots of bridge inspections done, roughly $500,000 worth in 6 different entries. And just wondering why this is 6 expenses. Is that 6 bridges or 6 batches of bridges or 6 separate reports?
So we have 1,451 structures that fall under this division. And within that, the inspections are broken into 2 groups. Large bridge structures, they're inspected every 2 years, and the smaller culvert type installations, they're inspected every 6 years.
Summerside South Drive.
Okay, so that's 2 separate categories. I guess why do we have 6 different chunks of bridge inspections? Why isn't it just one big chunk, or one for each bridge, or 2 chunks?
Yeah, Wendy has that for you.
The department tenders out contracts to perform the bridge inspections. This is for the contractors to perform the bridge inspections. They do multiple bridges, some large, some small structures, depending on the allocation for the year. But this is the actual contracts to those bridge.
Summerside South Drive.
Chair, so 6 different contractors is the answer here.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
You're welcome. Shall the section carry?
Chair.
Montague Kilmuir.
Thanks, Chair. The speaker is wondering when Grove Fine Bridge will be done and the bridge in Bridgetown. I think Grove Fine Bridge is in
We might have to get a ruling. I believe
I don't know if you could bring that back.
I believe the member requesting the information has to be in the House to ask the question. We'll certainly go into the department and get that information and bring it back.
Okay, Montague Kilmuir. Shall the section carry? Materials Testing Lab, appropriations provided for salaries and related support costs for the Materials Testing Lab, quality assurance for maintenance and construction operations. Administration, $12,400, equipment, $23,800, material supplies and services, $9,700, professional services, $5,000, salaries, $1,376,500, travel and training, $23,400, total Materials Testing Lab, $1,450,800. Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you spoke a bit earlier about our roads and the reasons why they don't last nearly so long, and some of the things we've tried in the past to change that. I'm just wondering if this is the section. Does this department work on ways to increase the lifespan of our roads?
No, this has more to do with the material that's going out into the roads to ensure that it's at the standards that it needs to be. Again, an important thing to remember is when you talk about the roads and the lifespan of the roads, if you take a house for an example, the roof of the house could potentially last 150 years. The shingles that are on the roof, much like the asphalt that's on our roads, it might have a 20-year life expectancy. So when we're talking about the lifespan of a road, it's different than the maintenance required to maintain a road.
Summerside South Drive.
So is there any department responsible for testing out new methods and like that? Like you listed a few there. I mean, the crushed.
Yeah. So again, honourable member, we have a very professional engineering staff in our department, and they do continual professional development. They're always talking with their fellow engineers, not just across the country, around the world. And they're always looking at innovative ways to maintain roads or to build roads.
Summerside South Drive.
But they're not part of this department. They're scattered through the.
They wouldn't be part of this section, no.
Okay.
Summerside South Drive.
That's fine, Chair.
Shall the section carry? Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. Is this a section for like highway paint and stuff like that? It's my annual question about not being able to see the lines on the road, and I've had a whole lot of seniors.
That section would have been traffic operations, but if you want to ask the question, go for it.
Sure.
Okay.
So I've had a lot of seniors talk about they just can't see the lines on the road, and even after it's newly painted, as soon as there's rain, anything, they feel like it's not just them, right? And so last time we had this conversation, we were talking about the national standards, right? Building roads to national standards, and but do you have an idea? Do we use the same kind of paint as other provinces do? And is it just, I don't know, like our roads and the challenge there? I know there was suggestions of using more tape in order to better define the lines, but that still doesn't provide, a high visibility for islanders, but especially seniors that are finding it challenging.
I would have to bring that information back for you. I know the chemical composition of the paints has changed over the years due to the fact that it needs to be environmentally friendly compared to some of the product that may have been used previously. But also depending upon the road and the material that is applied to the road in the wintertime, whether it's salt and sand, it's certainly going to impact the longevity of those markings as well. But I guess I'm falling into the category of the seniors you're talking about, but because I travel on some roads that I have a hard time seeing the lines too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. Especially when it's raining. Anyway, I would agree, and I know my eyesight's not great, but I don't want to put myself in that category yet, but I'm getting there soon.
Okay.
Anyway, but I would assume that the national standard has adopted a more environmentally friendly process to painting lines on the road, and I don't see that challenge. But even on Route 2, like when you're traveling between Charlottetown and PEI, or Charlottetown and Summerside, for instance, it's anyway, I could harp on it, and I ask it every year, and I'd just really like to understand.
Certainly. I'll bring back detailed information for you on that, honourable member.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Shall the section carry?
Carry.
Total capital project division, 11,122,100. Shall it carry?
Carry.
Access PEI. Appropriations provided for administrative support for staff who deliver programs and services on behalf of the provincial government departments through Access PEI sites. Administration, 165,000. Debt, 8,400. Equipment, 5,200. Material supplies and services, 83,400. Professional services, 109,600. Salaries, 3,924,400. Travel and training, 70,100. Total access PEI, 4,366,100. So I have a couple of questions. I get to choose the order. But I will mark down the other ones in it.
What are they?
So we spoke a couple of weeks ago about the Access PEI in Tignish. I guess it was actually, I can't remember when we were. That break week kind of throws me off. So I know that you had said you didn't hear any complaints. So I had put it out there for people that have came to me because that's what they they believe they have to go to their local MLA, as I'm their voice in here. So I put it out there for them to let your department know. And I know, receiving feedback from them, that many of them have, did follow up on that. So there is a great concern to have the Access PEI, and I can only speak for Tignish, that's the area I represent, to have it open on a weekly basis, because especially this time of the year, everybody's busy trying to get going. The fishers are out getting ready. They're going to be out on the water. Their time is limited that they can spend getting, whether it's motor vehicle registrations are not really the biggest thing right now because they can do that online. But other things that they may need at this access center, plus the plant workers. And I mentioned that one day in the House too, but the time for them to get off work to go to get whatever they need done at an access PEI center. So you couldn't give me a defined date, and the response that was sent to my residents was basically that once public health or the CPHO deems it safe, that Access PEI location at Tignish will be open on a weekly basis. So apparently the issue is safety. Can you just give me a little bit more elaboration on what that safety consists of?
So obviously, as you're aware, we're still under a pandemic, right? And with regards to the protocols that came out around pandemic and how we're protecting not only our clients, your constituents, your residents, but also our staff, there was 2 sites that we did alternating weeks on between Alberton and Tignish, because they're single access sites, right? So we need to ensure that we have a staff to serve the client, but also a staff member there to do the necessary sanitizing and cleaning. So that's why they've gone to that model. We're hoping that we can revert to normal scheduling in the very near future. Honourable Member, I just don't have that exact date for you at this time. Very concerning what we're seeing right now in our neighbouring provinces. Very concerning with what we've seen here in the last week with regards to increased cases of COVID, as well as hospitalizations. So we're still taking this pandemic extremely serious. We're offering more and more services online all the time. But if there's specific requests or specific hardships that people are having accessing a service, they might not be able to take that approximate 20-minute drive to Alberton to get service there. Certainly, our director at Access PEI or myself, we'd be more than happy to hear from those individuals to see how best we can accommodate them outside of our normal protocols at this time.
Okay, and I do understand that more services are being provided online, and hence my bill on the floor yesterday. The majority and a large chunk of my district does not have adequate internet service, nor do they have adequate cell phone service. And a lot of seniors really need that help, that assistance, and they come to the Access PEI for that. We talked today about seniors' home repair programs and other programs. They need help. A lot of them aren't computer savvy, and they don't even have access to one. So they rely on this, and there's a lot of confusion over when it's open, when it's not open. Even though it's alternating weeks, they don't keep track of it. But I understand at Tignish, it was one person working there full time, but I think there was also a position that was there a percentage, and I'm not sure if it was a 50, 60%, but it was they were mostly taken out of Tignish and brought into the O'Leary Service Center. The end of last year, there was a position filled in Tignish. It was a bilingual position, so now there are two filled positions in Tignish. Those 2 individuals are doing the alternating weeks in Tignish and Alberton. The Alberton clerk has taken a leave of absence, and her position, which was temporarily filled, is working out of the O'Leary Access office, and the other position that was supposed to be put out for Alberton has not been put out yet. So do you know when that position may be put out?
I will contact my director of Access PEI today and get that answer for you and provide it to you tomorrow.
Okay, and I'll get, it's really, I'm really pushing this a lot because when you're one of the extremities on the island and you're, 2 hours from Charlottetown, and then everything's not all Charlottetown, I keep saying that. Anybody in this area can have access to any government department, with a short drive or what have you. But when you're 2 hours away, Access PEI is your go-to for everything government. So it's very important for my district to have access to it weekly and consistently. And I just want to make sure that gets across. So you can get back with those answers, I'd appreciate it.
You have my commitment on that, Honourable Member.
I have that enhancer, thank you. O'Leary Inverness.
People from Tignish really like coming to O'Leary. I don't know what, but
I can't say it in here.
What do they say?
Can't say it.
Just so you know, I think they are mellowing a bit now that we have a cannabis store in O'Leary, but...
I think there's a lot more people.
Anyway, Minister, just on that section in the budget there, you got quite an increase in salaries, and it's 1.3 million increase in salary. Now, when I'm at my access centre in O'Leary, I do see at least one person that's doing a lot of the disinfecting and all the light switches and doorknobs and things of that nature. But maybe you could explain a little bit about what that increase in salaries is for, how many positions actually were created, and where they might be distributed to. I don't necessarily know how many new in O'Leary, but Kings, Prince, Queens, whatever, and or has the hiring even started for those positions yet, or is there something new here that I'm not aware of?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of everything you spoke about there and then some, Honourable Member. So a fairly significant part of it is stepped incremental changes within the contract with the union, the wages. There's also 6 additional customer service reps and 1 new manager in a new program to help, as we talked about, the online, the contactless service center that we opened up. So that's online telephone service as well. And then also the development and establishment of the service PEI to provide guidance and service to islanders relating to programming and services provided by the PEI government.
O'Leary Inverness.
So some of these positions are going to be more ITSS types of positions in dealing with the online component, and I guess my other question on that would be, will they be distributed across the island? Because Access PEI does seem to employ people all across the island versus say at one centre, or what's the vision?
So we have one new centre that we've opened up, and that's what we refer to as the Contact PEI or contactless centre, and that's in Georgetown.
O'Leary Inverness.
But just specifically for O'Leary, like one thing I do notice is there seems to be more people working from home. So I get 2 issues with that. I see a lot of the agricultural insurance workers are working from home, which I can sort of see makes some sense. But what I'm also getting is some of the workers that are at social services. They seem to be rotating them through or something of that nature, where they're working from home maybe 2 days a week and 3 days in the office. And
Honourable Member, I couldn't really speak to employment with social services. Doesn't come under transfer.
Yours more the building itself.
Yeah.
So, but then my observation would be is that there's not enough space then for the social services within the Access Centre in O'Leary, since they all can't work in the office at the same time for some, I guess the reason is social distancing, but maybe you could look into that particular issue and to see if there's enough space, because once again, I'm seeing space that's empty and nobody in it. And then you get another section, which is mostly the social services section, which has, I'm assuming, too many people in it is the reason and rationale behind that. But ultimately, it still comes back to service issues in the respect that I do get people saying to me that they aren't able to access the services to visit somebody in person because they're working from home. How are we dealing with that?
Again, we're providing the service, whether it's online, whether it's by telephone, whether it's in our actual physical locations across PEI.
Chair. You can.
O'Leary and Vanessa?
Yeah, you can appreciate then, so when people are in social assistance, they probably don't have the access to the online services that many do. I mean, I do know you can go to a library and things of that nature. But it's the complaints I'm getting is that they can't get an appointment quick enough because the person isn't working there on a particular day. And so I guess I'm just trying to say that, I think we need to provide them the space that accommodates the staff to do their work, to do it and deal with the public that they normally would deal with. I guess the demographics of people with lower incomes are less likely to be online and less likely to have the resources to purchase online services. So,
Sure, yeah, honourable member, I'd be more than happy to have a discussion with the minister responsible for social development and housing and see what their needs are. But again, as I mentioned to the honourable chair here a short time ago, we are still in a pandemic. We are still under certain protocols. I had a phone call 2 nights ago from a gentleman that was quite concerned. He went to Summerside to access PEI, and he was very concerned because when he went in, there was 10 people standing in the hallway waiting to go in. And so people still have that in their mind, and rightfully so. They should be concerned because we want to ensure that people are wearing the mask, that people are social distancing, that people aren't getting lax on the protocols that Dr. Heather Morrison and her team are reminding us daily about.
O'Leary and Vanessa?
And it's a very valid point, but I would also argue that the department that's responsible for these centers needs to provide them the space to people to do the work. We still have to deliver the service. Yes, we're doing it in a pandemic, and this could last maybe another year or more. So, whether it means a mobile office space to come in to help or whatever. I mean, people still are wanting to come and show up at these places. So, or it's a bigger waiting room. I'm not sure what the solution is, but I guess you're the minister, and I would hope your department would work towards that. I just would want, once again, the people in my riding to have access to the services in a safe manner as best you possibly can. So I think that's all I've...
Yep, no, I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Summerside South Drive?
Thank you, Chair. What is the service PEI strategy for, about 50,000?
Do you have that right at fingertips there, Wendy?
Service PEI strategy, they are working through a strategy to develop a service PEI model, which will provide services to islanders, government services, all government services to islanders. It's a new corporate service entity. It's still in the strategy development stage.
Summerside South Drive?
Okay, well, perhaps a little related to that. The next one, were there any additional expenses related to Access PEI's contactless services pilot in Montague?
In where?
In Montague, the contactless service pilot?
The contactless pilot was offered during the height of the pandemic, I should say, when everything was closed. So it was using existing staff and existing resources located in the Montague Access Center.
Summerside South Drive?
So was the cost of delivering that the same as it would have been as if was it all just salaries? Was there any additional cost, or was it a cost savings?
It would be approximately the same cost, would be the same staff, the same building.
Summerside South Drive?
Thank you, Chair. The pilot was transitioned to a permanent service last fall. Is this available island-wide or only in Montague?
Go ahead.
It's actually the contactless PEI was successful, that they've moved to a more permanent type setting operating out of Georgetown. It's still, again, in the development stages. It is operational for some services, but they're still developing what items will be delivered out of that location.
Summerside South Drive?
Okay, so no longer Montague, now in Georgetown only. Are there any further plans to expand that to other Access PEI locations?
Yeah, it's a phone service, so it's contactless.
Summerside South Drive?
So once all the in-person services are restored, will there be any additional expenses incurred to operate both regular in-person and the contactless services?
I wouldn't expect there'd be additional expenses incurred. We do see, to a certain extent, a shift towards more contactless, while at the same time, the number of touch points, islanders needing those services continues to grow as well. As our population grows, the number of driver's license grows, the number of vehicles grows, the registration of vehicles grows. So again, I used it this year for the first time to re-register my vehicle, and it was great. It was such a time savings for me that I didn't actually have to go in and take a number and wait on a line outside and things like that. So I found it to be extremely convenient and a great way to get my business done.
Summerside South Drive?
Yeah, I can appreciate that, and it does sound like a great program. I'm just wondering if, I mean, we had it in the pandemic when you couldn't really get into the physical locations, and we're going to get back someday to having all those physical locations up and all their services running as they were before. And where are we still going to have that contactless option at that time?
Yeah. Yes, we will.
Summerside South Drive?
And will that be an additional expense?
No, we have that expense now. We added that on. So that's, you asked, or someone asked a while ago, how come we had an increase or differential in salaries, and that's exactly why. And so as at some point in time when we transition back to full service in Alberton and Tignish, the staff are still working. It's just they're alternating back and forth between two facilities right now on a weekly basis. So we expect that the expenses will remain static, with the exception of increase in hourly wages because of our collective agreements and things like that.
Summerside South Drive?
That's good, Chair. I'm done.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Thank you, Chair. Minister, you know, you look at the pandemic, and you saw maybe some errors in the way we handled some things. I look at maybe the liquor store debaclement where we had a lot of people run to the liquor store. I look at all at the same time. I look at Access PEI and the location in Charlottetown, and I want to know what you've learned from the way that was handled over the pandemic to reduce crowds.
You know, I applaud the staff and the initiatives that they undertook to ensure that service was still provided. To this day, you look there and you see the tents that are in place to protect people from the weather. We put in pager systems in some locations so that they could go sit in their car, and when it was their turn to come in, we would beep them, they would come in. The contactless service that we just discussed here for quite some time, it's been extremely well received and is being utilized by many islanders. So I applaud the staff for the initiative that they took to not only continue to provide the services, but also to ensure that their clients and their staff were safe.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
You might be doing this already, but you look at the medical system, you get some advanced walk-in clinics where they're given the time. Is that happening now? They're given the time in advance when you contact, or you have to contact Access PEI, you're given a time or range to come down and show up to your appointment so much.
Yeah, for driver's license exams, certainly we're doing that. We've also put in the initiative that certain days, certain hours earlier in the day is reserved for seniors, things like that.
Yeah.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
And I'm just looking at, okay, some places in our country, God forbid, are heading into a third wave, and you know, we don't want to have a big influx of people in the same way. So I'm just, that's why I'm asking these type of questions. So,
and remember, that's why we're so adamant that we keep people safe and that we keep our protocols that have worked extremely well for us to date in place.
Yeah. You're in between an online system that people use, and you're in between regular access, and that's where we are kind of in our society, I would think, with things. Is there any discussion about a secondary access site within the capital region? Population growth is up. Is there any a smaller site to maybe deviate some of the areas? I know there's some services provided in Stratford. Is there any look at those two options?
Yeah, there's nothing in Stratford.
Well, is there any talk about an access site in the Stratford area as the population grows and to alleviate some of the? Mount Stewart, you want to Mount Stewart? Mount Stewart?
I know the honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbank. I have a meeting coming up fairly soon with Mayor McCord and some of the representatives from council. I'm sure the honourable member will be there too, and that's one of the agenda items that I know they want to talk about. Again, we're open to looking at how we deliver our service across the island, and certainly as development expands, our population expands, we need to be cognizant that we have the staff in place and the service in place to service our clientele appropriately in a timely manner.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
No, because I'm just hearing about, long wait times, and I know there's some gaps, and I know there's some encouraging Islanders to do as much as they can online. How is the department helping that process? Is there a marketing campaign to move more people to an online? Have you spent some dollars in that area to get people moving to an online system?
Yeah, I mean, we've had some social media activities over the last while, or since the pandemic started, reminding people that you can also access it online or over the telephone, that type of thing. It's an ongoing education process. If you visit our website, the information is there as well. Yeah. The various ways that you can access the service that Access PEI offers.
Yeah.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Minister. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Charlotte Section carry? Total access PEI 4,366,100. Shall it carry? Total Department of Transportation and Infrastructure 201,525,700. Shall it carry?
Carry. Continue on to the next section?
Yeah, we're moving on to Justice and Public Safety.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
That's what I was wondering.
Do you want to do my section?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Honorable members, we're moving on to the Department of Justice and Public Safety. You'll find that on page 112. A request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? You should take the glass of water too, please. Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon and welcome. Would you please state your name and title for Hansard?
Michelle Keown, Director of Finance and Administration for the Department of Justice and Public Safety.
Thank you, Michelle. Again, we are on page 112. Minister's Deputy Minister's Office, Minister's Deputy Minister's Office, appropriations provided for operation of the Office of the Minister and Deputy Minister, Administration $19,000, Equipment $6,000, Material Supplies and Services $10,200, Salaries $273,000, Travel and Training $34,200, Grants $400. Total Ministers, Deputy Minister's Office $342,800. Shall I carry? Total Ministers, Deputy Minister's Office, $342,800. Shall carry. Justice Policy, Planning and, FPT Relations. Justice Policy, Planning and FPT Relations. Appropriations provided to assist the Minister and the Deputy Minister regarding policy and legislation Development, as well as federal, provincial, territorial relations, and the Human Rights Commission. Administration, $10,000. Equipment, $1,500. Material, supplies, and services, $13,100. Professional services, $175,000. Salaries, $560,500. Travel and training, $22,200. Grants, Human Rights Commission, $600,000. Other, $425,000. Total justice, policy, planning, and FPT relations, $1,807,300. Summerside South Drive.
Chair, so we have a Division of Intergovernmental Affairs in Executive Council, and we've got this here. And I'm just wondering, is there any duplication that goes on? It seems like they both have a similar, not exactly the same.
No, this is our policy and planning division, and we are actually in policy and planning in agriculture. Our department moved to having a director in policy and planning, and that's what we're doing. And we're bringing to justice as well as a director of that, and we're looking forward to that new position.
Summerside South Drive.
Chair, I didn't quite hear there, Minister. Did you say 2 justices? Did I hear?
Bringing it to justice.
I did the same in agriculture, and I'm bringing it as well to justice.
Gotcha.
Summerside South Drive.
No, one justice is enough, thanks.
So the handout on page JPS 7, can you give us a summary of what the $60,750 policing services midpoint review will provide?
So that's, our midpoint review, and we've discussed this in the House a few times, where it's, we're looking at the halfway point for 6 years from the last review, and we want to see where we can move with our policing on Prince Edward Island, and see if there's a new direction or new venues, or so it's just a midpoint review of where we're at.
Summerside South Drive.
Chair, so how many recommendations of the 2017 police review has your department implemented?
I believe there's 13 of these 17.
13 of 17?
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I'll have to bring that back.
Summerside South Drive.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can you elaborate on the Freedom of Information and Protection Privacy Act review that was teased earlier this sitting?
I'm not sure if that's in this section or not, but I can bring that back.
Summerside South Drive.
What policy initiatives are underway to divert people from the criminal justice system? I know we've spoken a little bit about it in the House already, but we have a different kind of atmosphere here, and I'll give you a chance to speak about that a little bit more, Minister.
Could you speak a little louder?
Sure.
There's a piece of plastic in front of me here.
Yeah, I'm having similar problems. What policy initiatives are underway to divert people from the criminal justice system?
Some of the policy issues? Well, we have the Indigenous programs, like the Aboriginal caseworkers. We're adding one of those, Indigenous court work program. Provincial restorative justice is now in place, and Indigenous justice programs via PI are also in place. So we're really moving on that upstream approach on injustice, and we're also looking at therapeutic courts, and we have senior staff that are analyzing that now and seeing if we can, how we can go bring that to the justice system.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So is there any work at all within your department going on decriminalization of drugs, for instance?
Well, that's the work through a therapeutic court, which would probably be a drug court and a mental health court, is the therapeutic approach that we're going to take.
Summerside South Drive.
So you're saying that would be comparable to decriminalization?
I didn't say that. I just said that's the approach that our policy is taking.
Summerside South Drive.
We've spoken about this in the House as well, Minister, but I'd just like to give you another opportunity to speak about it in a different environment. Any plans to introduce class action lawsuit legislation?
Yes.
Summerside South Drive.
Okay. Straight up, yes. That's good for now, Chair. Thanks.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see we talked about this before, the Human Rights Commission, and there was a little bump there. Can you tell me if, in your opinion, that's enough? Or for them, there was a $50,000 bump? Is that what they were looking for? I know they're under a lot of stress.
Yeah, no, it's, we believe it's enough for now. It's something that we're going to continue to look at. They had some initiatives that they wanted to address, and we tried to help them with the short-term funding bump.
And with the $50,000 as permanent funding year over year, we did provide them with a $60,000 grant at the end of last year to provide some education and information to the communities.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
So I know it's a growing concern. They're doing a lot of work, and I think the number of cases are up. Do you have the number of cases, or is that has there been an increase in the number of cases?
Find the stats here now.
Should have them. Page 38. Halfway in the middle.
Open files, 157 in 2021.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Open files in 2021?
Yes, 20 and 2021.
Okay, 20 and 2021.
It looks as though those files have been going down compared to 170 last year, 157 the current year. Closed files went down, settled files went down, right across the board.
Okay. And yeah, and it's a good trend, but that number's still high. They do a lot of incredible work, and I think that yeah, it's good to see that they're well supported. On another note, the police report, Minister, the survey, the police survey, and you had mentioned, I think I heard you say that this was this due to the Black Lives Matter issues that were arising? I heard you say that maybe on the radio.
It definitely had an impact on bringing it forward, yes.
Yeah.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And you talked about it being a priority, that was it. And then at the same time, I don't understand. I went through the survey, and there was only question number 13 was the only question about diversity. I'm not sure how we can get a sense of what your words you were talking about and having a survey with one question on it related to diversity. Could you expand?
Well, I'll have to bring that back, whether with the third party that did the survey, and see if we can address that with, because they are going to go out to community groups and reach out to community groups that way. So I assume that will be the way they'll address the diversity and
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And I guess when I saw about that, it was kind of like, have you ever been discriminated against? And it just wasn't enough on a survey. And I was optimistic hearing your words.
So the survey was just part of it. I believe they're doing about 87 meetings, so with community groups, and so that will give a broader scope.
Yeah.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And I guess it was just a sense of this is what I saw, and I want this to mean something, and I want
absolutely,
and be just in the end. And I'm looking forward to seeing it, because it is issues, and people come to me with issues, and there's definitely issues of discrimination that we see, and we're trying to address in Prince Edward Island, Charlottetown, and all across our island. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. That's it for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering what the average timeline is to complete a human rights complaint through the HRC.
I'd have to bring that. We'll have to bring that back.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. And last year, government passed the Children's Law Act, which is an excellent piece of legislation. And as part of that, one of the provisions it included is that it requires the act to be construed and applied in a manner that is consistent with the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child. and requires in all proceedings under that act that the best interests of the child be the primary consideration of the court. Is the department engaged in any sort of education around the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and best interests of the child?
I'll have to bring that back, but that's a good question, and I
Okay.
definitely will get on top of that.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one last question, and this may be part of the bringing it back, but I'm just wondering if there's any plans to incorporate that, the convention and the best interests of the child into other enactments as well.
I'll bring that back as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Victoria Park. Shall the section carry?
Chair.
Leader of the opposition.
Right, I'm just going to couple of follow-up questions from some of my colleagues. Minister, you were asked how many of the recommendations from the 2017 police review were implemented. I think you said 13. So which ones were not implemented? Can you, do you have that list there?
I think
or maybe the stranger has that.
Do not have that with me, but we can definitely bring those back.
I can bring those back. Yeah.
Okay.
Leader of the opposition.
Thanks, Chair. They were, in some respects, I don't have the list in front of me either, but if my memory serves me right, they were the most complex, perhaps, and potentially contentious ones.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah, and I'm wondering whether there's any intention to actually implement them before the end of the review process.
Well, it's something that we're always. The first police review has really brought the forces together and everybody talking. If it accomplished anything, it really brought unity to island policing across this island, and I'm hopeful that we can keep moving in that direction. And the conversations have been very positive, and I think there's a willingness to get along and to work together, and so I really want to keep establishing that and move forward on that.
Leader of the opposition.
Thanks, Chair. And of course, that is the core sort of contentious issue, is the unification of a police force across the whole province. So based on the answer you just gave me there, it sounds like at least some discussions are happening. Is it fair to say that there is a move towards implementing that recommendation?
Yes, before COVID, they were meeting on a regular basis, and since COVID, I'd have to check how many, they probably met virtually, but I'd have to check the progress on that.
Leader of the opposition.
So would you say that there is an appetite then within the various police forces here for that unification?
There is conversation.
Leader of the opposition.
Okay. I'll leave that issue there, but I do have another question, and it was about class action lawsuits, and you answered that yes, you are planning to bring that forward, and my question is when?
We're working on the draft now.
Leader of the opposition.
So again, without pinning you down to a particular date, are we talking about months here, like perhaps the fall sitting, or less than a year? Can I ask you definitively less than a year?
Yes.
Yes, less than a year. Great.
Okay. Leader of the opposition.
I'm good. Thank you, Chair.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Yeah, in the 2017 police review, the sheriffs were left out. Are they going to be included in this one?
In the review?
I don't know if they were or not. We can find that out.
I'll find that out.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
I'll save my other questions for the next section.
Okay, Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. Last November, there was supposed to be a meeting for the ministers responsible for human rights, which would focus on the diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism measures in the context of human rights obligations. What were the takeaways from that meeting?
The Human Rights Convention that was supposed to be in Halifax last May was postponed till the fall. And unfortunately, I believe I was in the legislature when that happened. So I'll have to get the summary for you.
Summerside South Drive.
Okay. A departmental briefing note called BLM-BIPOC-Justice Sector Police Initiatives provides some context talk about the importance of addressing issues raised by the Black Lives Matter movement, but offers little in the way of concrete actions government's taking to ensure fair treatment of racialized people in the PEI justice system. Can you elaborate on the specific actions your department is taking? We just heard about the survey there.
I'll bring that back.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. Are you working on any updates to legislation or regulations?
I'll bring back.
Summerside South Drive.
That's good, Chair. Thank you.
Shall the section carry? Carry. Total Justice Policy Planning and FPT Relations, 1,807,300. Shall it carry? Carry. Financial and Consumer Services, Regulatory Oversight. Appropriations provided for Prince Edward Island's financial sector regulations, including oversight of private and public capital raising activity, distribution of investment and insurance products and services, provincially regulated deposit taking and lending, real estate trading, charitable gaming, payday lending, debt collection, and consumer credit reporting. Administration, $31,900. Equipment, $2,400. Material supplies and services, $10,000. Professional services, $130,000. Salaries, $677,000. Travel and training, $11,700. Total regulatory oversight, $863,000. Shall the section carry? Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks. So we've had, of course, lots of reports of speculative real estate buying here on Prince Edward Island. So I'm wondering what, if anything, this division is doing to regulate speculative real estate trading here on PEI.
I'll have to bring that back.
Leader of the Opposition.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't know the answer to that question, so I'm wondering what does this division regulate when it comes to real estate trading?
Actually, I'll have to find that out as
The
well.
licensing of it.
The licensing
For
of.
one thing, there may be others, but we
Yeah.
Leader of the Opposition.
So you'll bring that back, Minister?
Definitely,
Okay,
yes.
great. So can you elaborate on the oversight of debt collection?
Of the oversight of debt collection.
Yeah, which is part of this division's mandate.
So this is the regulatory body that oversees that, and they continue to monitor and set up the regs to protect consumers.
Leader of the Opposition.
And part of that, there were some changes to the payday legislation last year, I think it was, and so is the province considering either tightening that further or any further regulatory changes when it comes to payday lending?
Well, right now we are happy wherever that is at. We went from the worst to the best in one regulation change. So, but we'll continue to monitor that. Yes.
Leader of the Opposition.
So are we still, because I know other provinces have also flagged this as a real issue, so are we still the best? I know that when this was changed, we leapfrogged the pack, but are we still at the front?
I'll have to look into that.
Okay.
Leader of the Opposition.
And what kind of consumer protection legislation is on the books in PEI at the moment?
I'll bring that back.
Leader of the Opposition.
Something we looked at in our office a little while ago, and it's pretty thin compared to other provinces. And so I'm wondering whether the department is looking at expanding consumer protection rights here on Prince Edward Island. You mentioned that we were at the back of the pack in payday loans. It's if you do a jurisdictional scan on consumer protection legislation, can't say this for sure, but we're definitely not at the front on that.
Right.
So are we planning any legislative changes?
Well, it's not in our budget. These are not budget questions you're asking, but I will definitely bring those back. Yes.
Sure. Leader of the Opposition.
Yeah, I understand that, but staff in the office are working presumably on lots of different kinds of legislation all the time. So it is the appropriate place to ask whether work of this nature is being done. So I'm sorry, did you say you were going to bring that back?
Yes.
Or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm good. Thank you, Chair.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Sorry, Chair. I'm good.
Okay. Cornwall Meadowbank.
Curious, I know obviously it says oversight of private public capital raising activity. What role do you play in the new gaming program that we've been talking about all week?
What role?
What role does your department?
Could you repeat that question, please?
What role does your department play in the new gaming?
The new gaming?
That's been proposed by ALC.
Right. It's with Department of Finance. So, yeah.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
So it says oversight of private and public capital raising activity. Would that not constitute?
So that would be like your charity bingos and your Chase the Ace.
Yeah, it does say
Cornwall
that
Meadowbank.
further down in the paragraph, charitable gaming, payday lending, debt collecting, and consumer credit reporting. So your office has no oversight on
No.
on that? Okay, thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Charlottetown Belvedere.
Chair. There was a commitment made during the throne speech around equity investment. And this is something that I believe does fall under this section, given the regulatory oversight. I know in my previous professional role in the startup community, this was something of great discussion with representatives from the Department of Justice around the work that needed to be done from a regulatory perspective. So there has been a commitment made. Can you speak to sort of where we're actually at with it from the regulatory side on that being ready to go?
I'll have to bring that back with an update for you.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. And one of the things that have been discussed previously from the perspective of business startups for equity investment, there are equity investment models that are being used in other parts, other jurisdictions in Canada, but we actually don't currently have legislation that allows equity funding by individuals here currently. So the model would be something like, for instance, crowdfunding or share sales for a share of equity versus what we see currently on a product basis. There is expertise in other areas. So perhaps one of the things I would ask for is when you bring that back is are we looking at other models in other jurisdictions, to do that work here?
Yeah, we are always doing an jurisdictional oversight, and we can always do more, and we'll always look at where we can go. And consumer protection is a huge issue for this department, and they will continue to look at that. But I will bring that back.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you. Another piece around sort of an investment model is there's a model both in Nova Scotia as CDIF and the one that we've had here, CDBs, which are community equity investment grants or models that allow for investment. The one in Nova Scotia, for example, uses RRSPs, and what it does is it encourages investment by ensuring that islanders are investing locally rather than sending their money offshore. Is that another aspect that's still sort of on the books for modeling here?
Steve could answer that better than I could.
Yeah, I think we'll have to get Steve Dowling to bring these back for us.
Okay.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Okay, thank you. I've just made, there may be any other section, I think, questions around sort of cooperatives and business registrations, that's in the registry services, right? Next section. Okay, so last question, Chair, on this regulatory oversight section is there'd been some talk about sort of that oversight on online spaces. Is there oversight in terms of, through your department, in terms of online lenders? So for instance, financial models that use online applications and to provide alternative loan products?
Yeah, they are all monitored by this, yes.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you. What level of oversight or requirement is there of those where we have, for instance, loan companies that are often an alternative for people to go to who are not able to get loans from traditional places, but as a consequence are taking on loans at 49% interest rates? Are they protected as consumers through our own oversight here provincially?
I'll have to bring that back for sure. Thanks.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Minister. I'd appreciate that. It's a growing concern for people who are in financial difficulty. So I would appreciate some feedback on what protection we can afford them. Thank you, Chair. I'm done.
You're welcome. Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Chair. So, payday lending, a lot of those places would be, and you just talked about oversight for online lenders around the payday lending scenario. And the Minister of Finance talks about the ALC program as being a repatriation of money in our province from external areas. Wouldn't this be the section to be set up for under justice that can monitor the money in the gaming places that we're losing all that money to internationally?
That's a good question, but I'll have to bring that back.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Okay. So you're going to go and get that answer, because I really see it as that if we're losing so much money, we're only talking about one solution, and I think justice needs to be involved in that, and we need to tighten up and do something from both angles if we're losing that much money. So, I mean, bringing it back would be good. So you're just going to bring that answer back, or you're going to? So
When you talk about losing money that to the unlegislated gaming sites that are offshore?
Legislative.
So how is the Department of Justice, a PI, going to monitor offshore gaming sites?
Well,
if that's how I understood your question.
You can say offshore. You can say
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Poker Stars or wherever else. But you just talked about there are companies that are set up. So whatever wording you use, the Islanders are playing. We need some oversight.
So that's why they're bringing. That's what they're doing to regulate the gaming on Prince Edward Island.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
No, Minister. That's not. That's an aspect of what the minister is talking about. But we're not looking at it. We're not looking at going after people. There's no oversight for them to play those games. Like there's oversight for online lenders, but there's no oversight. Anybody can play. So by putting in an ALC gaming formula, that doesn't mean that they still can't play that. And I'm asking you, can you look into that?
I will.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Thank you.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Who's that?
Cornwall Meadowbank?
I don't even know.
We're talking about consumer rights, and I know in Quebec they tried to pass Bill 197 on right to repair, and it was pushed back pretty hard by large manufacturers, tech companies basically. And I was wondering if you guys ever had any discussion on that. In other words, if this phone breaks down, it's cheaper for me to go pay more money than it is likely to fix it because they charge so much. So
Yeah.
I guess consumers' right to repair.
Quebec are leading the country in consumer protection law, and it's something that they are getting some pushback. So it's something we have to. There's a happy medium. There's a balance that we have to continue to look at.
Cornwall Meadowbank?
So is that something that you can say that you're kind of looking at, or? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Shall the section carry? Carry. Registry services. Appropriations provided for the administrations of 4 provincial document and information registries: Corporate and Business Names Registry, Vital Statistics Registry, Lobbyist Registry, and Personal Property Registry. Administration, $14,800. Equipment, $2,000. Material Supplies and Services, $11,700. Professional Services, $13,000. Salary, $639,200. Travel and Training, $6,600. Total Registry Services, $687,300. Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. I enjoy a good registry. My challenge is the Business Corporation Registry, the name registry, business name registry is not one that is, I would say, efficient, because there is 2 versions of it. So you almost have to check 2 places in order to look up one name to ensure that you're getting a full picture. So, Minister, what are you doing in order to merge those registries so that we no longer have 2 databases to track corporate ownership and business names?
Well, I don't know if you dived into the federal budget lately, but the federal government has a budget item for doing a LOTA, and they're reaching out to provinces to jump on. And LOTA, Land Ownership Transparency Act, is something that we have been talking about and direction we want to go. So I think at the end of the day, LOTA will be the best for transparency of land ownership on this island.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So that would come down to beneficial ownership? Yes. So there was legislation passed in the Business Corporations Act, and has that been enacted yet?
It hasn't been, but we're working through it. When you solve one problem, you create a whole bunch more, and there was a lot of changing that was going to put quite a few firms offside with no fault of their own, and so we're just waiting for the proper process to make sure everyone's on side, and then we can implement it.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thank you, Chair. Can you elaborate on that? What does that mean? If the beneficial ownership came into enforcement, it puts them offside? What do you mean by that?
Well, just the way they had their companies set up, you know, it was, when we made the amendments, it just, no fault of their own, they were abiding by the law, but when we changed the beneficial ownership, it kind of put them offside just by the way the amendment was made.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thanks, Chair. So when you say offside, though, are you saying offside for the Business Corporations Act?
Yes.
Mermaid Stratford?
No, offside of land holdings, and so it was a trickle-down effect, so we just have to do it in steps form.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thanks, Chair. So the trickle-down effect, can you elaborate on that? And how many farms would be impacted by that?
No, I can't elaborate, but I can.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thanks, Chair. So when you brought the legislation forward, did you consult with stakeholders to identify that prior to it coming to the legislature?
Probably not as well. It was an amendment that was brought by the opposition.
Mermaid Stratford?
Wasn't it?
No.
It was
It
in
certainly
consultation with collaboration with the opposition at the time. So.
Mermaid Stratford?
Oh, no, I would not agree with that statement, Minister. When government brings forward legislation and they brief us, that means that, you know, you trust that consultation has been done. When you asked, did you consult all the parties? And when we discussed the Business Corporations Act, you had said that it's something that was being done at a federal level and all provinces are following suit. Therefore, it was basically just following suit of the federal act. Is that different now?
No.
Mermaid Stratford?
So it's not different now, but other provinces were able to, is it
I don't know
enacted in other provinces?
I'm not sure.
Mermaid Stratford?
Okay, so what's your intention, Minister, then, if, at this point in time, with that legislation?
No, we fully intend to bring it, enact the amendment.
Mermaid Stratford?
And do you have a timeline on when you plan to enact the amendment?
Sooner than later. Yeah.
Mermaid Stratford?
Can you define sooner than later?
Well, we want to get the Lands Matter report back, and hopefully this fall.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thank you, Chair. So, but this is legislation that was already put forward, and so now it's on hold until the Land Matters PEI review is complete, is that?
I'll bring this back.
Mermaid Stratford?
All right, nothing further, thanks, Chair.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you, Chair. Under the registry service of corporate and business names, it includes non-profits and cooperatives, as well as the other more, business types. Cooperatives and non-profits have additional filing requirements to maintain their eligibility. What requirement? How is that checked up or kind of tracked by the department as part of the ongoing registry requirement?
I'll have to bring that back.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Okay, because.
Could you repeat? I couldn't actually hear your question, so.
Pardon me?
Could you repeat?
Okay, so nonprofits and cooperatives both have a requirement that they have to file annually a statement that of status, which so you indicate sort of, are you still operating, the names of the directors, assets, so on, and it's so that you can maintain your status as a nonprofit or a cooperative, because they have very different requirements than they do for a standard shareholder-based company. The requirement to do that seems to be somewhat voluntary, despite the fact that there is actually law that says that it should be done. So my question is how or if that is actually being monitored by the business registry aspect of your department.
Okay. I'll bring that back, but how often it is checked and how many staff we have dedicated to that, and I'll bring that back.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you, and the reason is not because I'm in favor of sort of performative record keeping. Though doing those updates is a pain because they have to be done by paper. There's no, as far as I'm aware, the last time I had to do them, they were still paper-based. Maybe that's changed. But that they actually entitle those organizations, or they empower those organizations to have rights and access to things like nonprofit status that other organizations don't. So they're not just for the sake of filing. There is a reason for that.
Yeah. It's important that I know we had this discussion with Steve Dowling that we have to move a lot more paperless, more online, make it user-friendly, and that's the direction the department wants to go with that. And it's important that nonprofits aren't any more hindrance than they need to.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you, and I appreciate that, Minister. I know that you can renew those, things online, but like I said, where the conditions, they require some very specific things like filing of bylaws or director status, then that becomes a bit more complex. The other follow-up from this, Minister, is what is the role of the department when there is an issue with an organization that is not complying under the requirements of the Act for a nonprofit organization or a cooperative organization? What then happens in the event that there is a problem that needs to be addressed?
That's a great question. I'll bring the answer back for that.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you, Minister. And there may not be as many cooperatives in PEI as there are in other provinces, but we certainly have our fair share of nonprofits, that they can run into challenges just as any other business can. So sort of having some kind of process there. I have heard, Minister, that it's challenging to navigate that, and it may just be, again, not getting the right person to ask the right question. But it would be very good to be able to follow that up with you, Minister. Just I think it may become more of an issue in pandemic times where things have become a crisis for a number of organizations. There's a lot of risk there.
Absolutely, and I'll commit to, maybe we'll have I'll bring it back and we'll have a conversation afterwards, and if there's any process we can do the nonprofits are very important to us, and they have to be checked regularly, and I understand that they have to have their due diligence, so I'll check on the process and see if we can improve or where we can improve.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you. And the other aspect of that, speaking about cooperatives, is we don't currently have a provincial cooperative association. There are a number of cooperatives here, but as I said, not very many compared to other provinces. Has there been any appetite within your department or within government overall to look at providing more support for and encouraging cooperatives to provide an alternative way to do things, for instance, like housing?
There hasn't been, but maybe that's a direction we should look at, and we'll definitely look at that.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you. I would appreciate the opportunity to perhaps have a discussion, Minister, with you on that one. There's a cooperative that's close to my heart is the Farmers Market. in my district, which obviously crosses over to both of your portfolios, so that could be a really interesting conversation.
There would be.
A cooperative is hard, and they need a lot of support, and they need a lot of support to be able to continue for a long period of time. So it's something which can be very valuable in the community, but does need some investment, not financial, but necessarily, but
mostly set up. It's important when you set up in a long-term plan. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have a conversation about this.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Summerside Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. And Minister, I had a question for you. I don't even know if this is something you're familiar with, but I've had a conversation with actually a couple of people in the 2S LGBTQIA+ community who have indicated that the business names registry, presents some unique challenges for trans people. I guess I'd like to start by asking you if that's something you're aware of.
The challenges? No, it wasn't. So.
Summerside Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. So it's a unique situation for an individual who is transitioning because their legal name would be a gender they do not identify with, and they cannot use their given name, or their preferred name when they are registering their business. And for queer individuals who are trying to get businesses off the ground, this presents a lot of traumatizing experiences for them, as I'm sure you can understand. I'm curious what government is doing to support trans business owners.
So that's, thank you for bringing this forward, member, and it's something that we'll definitely address on the Business Corp and Corp Registry, and it's something that government has to look across as all departments on how we can best support these people.
Summerside Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate that answer, Minister. I really do. I've done a scan of other provinces, and I don't see great examples in Canada of ways that governments are supporting trans business owners. But I do understand there are some examples in other jurisdictions. If I forwarded that along to your office, would you be willing to look into that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Summerside Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. No further questions.
You're welcome. Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. My original question, I guess, around the business corporation registry. And yes, I was paying attention, kind of we went somewhere else, but I was paying attention to the federal budget, which is one of the things that I was really interested in seeing. So were you aware that that was an initiative that they were undertaking prior to the budget being
we've had conversations with other jurisdictions, and I know other provinces, BC and Quebec, have been, as well as PEI, have been lobbying for this, and we were grateful to see it come, or start anyway. So I think there will be more and more uptake across the country on this.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thanks, Sharon. And it's actually something that the Ontario Information and Privacy Commissioner put forward in a white paper to say that everybody should do it, and that it should be a registry that is free, accessible, and searchable. So that's the challenge that I have with our current setup, because we have two registries. They were never merged together. And do you see the ability that you could potentially work with the other provinces to have a registry that would be similar, so that we can join forces and get it done quickly?
Yeah, we've looked at the BC model. It's a model that maybe is most closely to our needs, and we fully intend to work with the provinces and to get a national. Yeah, we'll want to lead the charge in this for sure.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. And do you have any timeline, like even estimates? Are we talking a year, 2 years?
It's a big piece of work. So I don't want to put any timelines on it, but it is something that we are working towards.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. And you had mentioned that you have a policy team in place that similar model to what you had over in agriculture, which I commend you for doing that, because I do agree with that model that you have set up. So and typically when you go to do your initial plan, you would do a jurisdictional scan and that kind of thing. Is there information around that that you can actually share, some preliminary work that you've done? And will there be public consultation on what it will look like in the end?
Yeah, well, the department's working on a strategic plan now, and we hope to have it ready this,
Meeting
later this summer, yeah. So we'll have that for sure. And with our policy department, we have to work close. We have to do a jurisdictional scan because we have to work closely with the federal government and our other provinces to align, to have unification on all our laws and our justice system. So there is a big component of our FPT in this.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thanks, Sharon. Just one other question. Is there foreseeably any way that the land registry can be tied to this business corporation registry?
That's something to look at. Definitely would be most convenient for everyone and simpler, and I'd love to see that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thank you, Chair. And I would 100% agree. I think, having something that is actually not only accessible but efficient,
Yep.
right, makes sense. And then you're not maintaining a whole lot of different registries, because when I look at this section, there's about 4 or 5 or 6 different registries on the go, and that's not even including what you probably have in agriculture. So
Yep.
I think that would be a
I
really
think I agree with you on
great
that.
way to go. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Mermaid
Appreciate it.
Stratford? Okay, shall the section carry? Total financial and consumer services, $1,550,300. Shall it carry? Legal and legislative services. Legal services and legislative counsel appropriations provided for legal services to government departments, commissions, and agencies for the legislative drafting services. Administration, $42,200. Equipment, $3,000. Material supplies and services, $81,600. Professional services, $9,000. Salaries, $2,270,500. Travel and training, $8,900. Grants, $13,900. Total legal services and legislative counsel, $2,429,100. So, side South Drive.
Chair, last year the Legislative Assembly got its own parliamentary council and no longer relies on the Legislative Council office for drafting requirements. How has this impacted the operations of the Legislative Council office? Has it allowed them to undertake new work?
That's a different section.
Section.
Oh, it's this side. It hasn't, do you want to answer?
No, as far as their workload goes, it has alleviated some of their workload, so they're able to keep up on government work.
Somerset South Drive.
Has the province developed a policy now for the procurement of legal services by government?
Yes.
Somerset South Drive.
Active for a year now.
Yeah, we're tweaking it a little bit here and there, but yes, it's the policy is drafted and is being tweaked a little bit here and there. We have a new director of legal and legislative services who's giving it a second look.
Thank you, Chair. Even with the addition of the Parliamentary Council, the workload is heavy at times on that side of things. Is there any ability for the procurement of legal services to help deal with backlogs as they might appear in that regard?
There's not right now, no.
Somerset South Drive.
That's something to look at anyway, Minister, but that's everything.
Okay. Shall the section carry? Total legal and legislative services, $2,429,100. Shall it carry? Okay, honourable members, we are now moving on to the next section on today's agenda.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Pardon me?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report progress and beg to leave to sit again.
Shall it carry? Carry. James? Chair of the Committee of the Whole House having under consideration the grant is applied to Her Majesty. I beg leave to report that the committee has made some progress and begs leave to sit again. I move the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall it carry?
then. The honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill to be intituled an act to amend the Audit Act.
Shall it carry? Overview.
An overview? Mr. Speaker, this bill aligns the appointment process of the Auditor General and the budget approval process for that office with the practices for other statutory officers in the Legislative Assembly. And I move, seconded by the Leader of the Third Party, that it be read a first time.
Shall it carry?
Bill number 109, an act to amend the Audit Act, read a first time.
The honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill to be intituled Ombudsperson Act. And I move, seconded by the Leader of the Third Party, that the same be now received and read a first time.
Shall it carry?
Bill number 110, Ombudsperson Act, read a first time.
No overview? No? That's the last bill, right? Yep. The honourable member from Mermaids, Stratford, and the Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, that the 24th order of the day be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order 24.
23.
My apologies, 23.
Shall it carry?
Order number 23, an act to amend the Health Services Act, Bill number 106, in committee.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford, the Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, that this House do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
The honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker, to chair the Committee of the Whole House, please.
The House is now in a committee of the whole House to take into consideration a bill to be intituled an act to amend the Health Services Act. A request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Good afternoon. Would you please introduce yourself and your position?
And Communications Officer for the official opposition.
Thank you very much and welcome. Honourable members, as we're all aware, this bill was sent back to committee for further debate. So the bill has already been read in the House, but I'm going to give an opportunity to the promoter to, she may have an opening statement.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that opportunity. So, since we last debated this bill and found ourselves at a bit of a standstill, I reached out to the Minister of Health and to the Premier with the hopes that we could engage in a discussion about the concerns that they and other members of their caucus had expressed around this bill and come to a compromise that will improve the good governance of our healthcare system while also addressing some of the main concerns that were brought forward. So I was pleased that we were able to engage in a discussion and felt that bringing this back to the legislature, we would be able to make progress. So that's where we are today.
Great. Well, thank you very much. The floor is open for questions. I have recognize the Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Chair, and certainly I want to thank the promoter of this bill for her initiative, for the official opposition's initiative right across the board. Certainly we look back, there was great debate, in my opinion, originally on the Act to amend the Health Services Act. At the end of the day, there were a lot of great points, I think, that were brought forward on both sides of that debate. And then you look at the vote, it was a tie, going back to an analogy that was made earlier today, hockey, but we're in a position here, I think that we're going to break that tie here this afternoon, hopefully. And what's resulted in that? It is the result of, as I had mentioned earlier today, that spirit of collaboration, working together to do the very best that we can. So I would suggest to the chair and certainly to all the members here that if we could proceed in the committee of the whole to deal with the entire bill, would that, rather than by section, is that agreeable?
Honourable member, the bill was already read before,
Okay,
so we already had it open for debate. So now it's just open for general questions or what have you.
So no, mine, I really don't have questions, Mr. Chair. It is just to as I have stated before, to state my appreciation as minister to the promoter of the bill for working together, for collaboration. I think it was evident when the bill was debated previously that one of the major concerns with regard to the amendment that was being brought forward was the fact that it completely removed the ability of the minister to provide directives to Health PEI. And I think on reflection, the promoter and in our discussions, that there's the realization of a couple of things there, that it is important for the minister in a portfolio, in a service that is as important to islanders as health and wellness, in the delivery of those services, that the ministry does have the ability to be able to provide that direction, both in a reactive and in a proactive manner, Mr. Chair. The information that I have, although the minister has had that ability for some time, that as I understand it, that it's only been exercised twice. But I do believe that it is important for the minister to have that. I want to give expression of my thanks right across the board to not only members and staff from the official opposition, but also to staff in my department, because right across the board, we have worked diligently on this to come to a resolution that I certainly hope that will pass here this afternoon. But going back to the directives, and we had the discussion as we move forward through this process of talks, of negotiations by times with the office of the official opposition, and in particular the promoter, and with the promoter and with her stranger on the floor here today. There was, as I'd mentioned, a couple of things. The reactive nature and requirement that needs to be there for ministerial directives. And we're thinking there along the lines of things that were brought up by a number of different members here in the House that were not comfortable with the original amendment, that if the board should make a decision that was felt by the minister, felt by the government of the day, that was not in the best interest, not only of all islanders. I think that we have to remember that, as we've said here before, that right across the board, healthcare is immensely important, but in our individual communities too, the delivery of healthcare services as much as possible has to be retained. So for whatever reason that we did have a board that made a decision that in a certain area of the province that was not acceptable, that the minister has to be able to react to that and has to be able to provide that directive. But when we're having this discussion, one of the things too that we touched base on was the need for the minister to be able to have a proactive or supply a proactive directive to Health PEI. And an example of that would be certainly the minister, the board members of the Board of Health PEI. You look at the strategic direction that is so important, and there's different aspects that will be stated explicitly in that strategic direction. So after a certain length of time, certainly that strategic direction needs to be monitored on an ongoing basis. But after a certain period of time, that there's one or two of those strategies that the board has not taken action on for whatever reason. So in that case, it's a proactive directive from the minister to the board that, yes, you need to take action on this. It's not because of an action that they didn't take, it's because, apologies, not for an action that they did take, but an action that they didn't. So again, with that, the second part, Mr. Chair, too, that we had great discussions on was with regard to the manner in which the CEO of Health PEI is appointed. So with that, Mr. Chair, I do have a couple of amendments. The first amendment to Bill number 106 is a House amendment dealing with Section 3, and I will be moving this amendment, seconded by the promoter of the bill. So
we'll now have it passed, but can I have you read that amendment into Hansard, please?
Certainly. First of all, Chair, briefing note, this motion deletes Section 3 of the bill, which repeals Section 3.1 of the Act and substitutes a new Section 3 of the bill, which repeals Section 3.1 of the Act and replaces it with a new proposed section of the Act. So, be it moved that Section 3 of Bill number 106 is deleted and the following substituted. Section 3. Section 3.1 of the Act is repealed and the following substituted. 3.1, Minister's Directive. 3.1 bracket 1, the minister may, from time to time, give a written directive to the board requiring Health PEI to A, carry out its operations and provide its health services in accordance with the strategic direction, plans, priorities, or guidelines for the healthcare system set by the minister. B, carry out its responsibilities as set out in this Act and to exercise its powers in accordance with this Act. Or C, coordinate the activities that it undertakes and the health services that it provides in the public interest. Under requirements, Section 2, under 3.1, the minister shall A, include reasons for the requirements in a written directive, and B, make the written directive available to the public within 30 days of giving it to the board.
Thank you very much. Members, everyone has received a copy of the amendment. Is there any discussion? Promoter.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to just say a few words as well. So, so it became, it was quite clear to everyone, I think, that we were at a stalemate, as I say, and my goal with this bill and bringing it forward is to improve the good governance and improve the governance within our healthcare system. And that is why I do believe that this amendment does improve what we have on now, what we have currently significantly, in that the minister must make public any directives that are made. It also simplifies the language in the bill, the original bill, the Health Services Act, that allowed the minister to do anything that the minister wanted at any time for any reason without providing any rationale. That was essentially what the language allowed for. So this amendment that is proposed here is very much an improvement on, I believe, on what was originally in the bill. And the minister mentioned that there's only been 2 times, to his knowledge, that authority has been exercised by the minister. Of course, nobody knows that or knows what those instances were because it was not made public. So with this amendment, any minister would need to, any future Minister of Health would need to think very carefully about exercising any authority that would provide direction to the Board of Health PEI, because they will then be required to make that public. And the reasons for that, and the reasons must be as outlined in this amendment as to what are some reasonable, what are some reasons why the minister might choose to do so. So this is, in my mind, an improvement, and look forward to discussion on this.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Shall the amendment carry?
Carry.
Sorry, Maureen Dona?
Thank you, Chair. So, can you give me like an example of like, explain this out in like how it would practically work out, like with a decision that's made and then going back to the department again, just so that we're clear on this?
Do I do it, or does the promoter of the amendment?
Actually, he's asking you if the promoter wants an intervention, he can.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So one of the main concerns that was highlighted during debate was, what if the Board of Health PEI decides to close a rural hospital, for example? So if that sort of extreme situation were to take place, which again would be a very extreme case, highly unlikely, but if it did, this would allow the minister to step in and require the board to rescind that decision and be able to provide a different direction. That being said, though, should the minister choose to exercise that power, and again, it would be in a very extreme situation, a minister would then have to provide to the public in writing why they made that decision. And this is that accountability piece, right? We kept coming back to that again, that the minister needs to be accountable. But right now, there's no way to hold the minister accountable for decisions that are made that are not made public. So this is really a vast improvement, as I say, over where we are currently.
So have an intervention from the Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Chair, and yes, I absolutely agree 100% with the comments that the promoter has just put forward. I think the other part, though, that this does, it certainly addresses the accountability, but also the transparency, and I think that we all need to endeavor to be, in all of our roles, as transparent as possible. And again, just to go back to what I had alluded to previously, was that on directives, those directives, there has to be the ability there for the minister to issue a directive not only in reaction to a decision that was made by Health PEI, but also proactively with regard to a decision or a direction that they had been instructed to take under, for example, of a strategic plan that they did not take, that the minister has the ability to exercise his or her right and with regard to a directive to go forward on that. So thank you, Chair.
Maureen Dona?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both. So, to the promoter of the bill, does this, like, we had a lot of discussion over, like, you know, where in the act does it actually fall to the minister's responsibility, and it seemed to be unclear to me exactly. Does this account for that, in your opinion? Like, does this clarify it?
I think that it addresses some of the concerns that were brought forward, I would say. I think there's been a lot of, I think quite honestly, there's a lot of mistrust in general around our healthcare system and how processes work. So this is a very big step in terms of transparency and accountability. But it also addresses another issue, which is, under the current legislation, the potential for political interference in that a minister could make a decision based on political reasons. Again, this is just theoretically talking about any minister in the future. This really minimizes that risk, in that the minister would have to make public the what they have changed, what direction they have made, and why they have made that choice. So it takes away some of that, the concern that decisions would be made behind closed doors that are not in the best interests of Islanders, or not based on evidence, because the minister will be required to provide that evidence. And should Islanders then feel that the minister is not making decisions based on evidence, Islanders will be able to hold them to account, as will the opposition and anybody else. So,
thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Shall that amendment, sorry, Charles,
I have a couple
Royalty.
questions. Under number 1, the minister may, from time to time, shouldn't it just read, the minister may give a written directive?
no, I really appreciate that question. I'm going to be honest with you, I would read that the same way. The current language in the Act is this from time to time, and it doesn't substantively change. To remove that doesn't really change anything, but I will agree that I did find that language a little odd, but it is what's in the Act currently.
Yeah, Mayor Shaw.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
And just why was the 30 days picked at the end?
That's a good question. It was something that I had brought forward as a possible timeline for consideration, just in that it gives time to get that out in the public in a way that it's going to be accessible for people. So just it seemed like a reasonable amount of time to make sure it's public, while not being an extreme length of time for which it would not be not be useful or relevant for folks to have that information. It just seemed reasonable to give it a little bit of time.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
And just to clarify, are those business days or those calendar days? Just because it might be at the end, the minister might take an extra 8 days or 7 days to come out with the decision. Is that?
Calendar days would be.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
I'm good, Chair, thank you.
Shall, for the third time, I'm looking around, shall this amendment carry? Carried. Okay, thank you. Amendment is carried. Any further? Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Chair. And as I had mentioned before, I do have a second House amendment to make as well.
Again, honourable members, we are passing around that amendment, and Minister, I'll ask you to read the amendment into Hansard, please.
Oh, okay. And before I read it in, the amendment, I move it, and it is seconded by the proponent. Okay. So, briefing note on this amendment, Chair, is this motion amends Section 5, Bracket 1 of the bill by deleting the proposed new subsection 11, Bracket 1 of the Act, and substituting proposed new subsections 11, Bracket 1 and 1.1 of the Act. So be it moved, subsection 5, Bracket 1 of Bill number 106 is amended by the deletion of the proposed subsection 11, Bracket 1, and the substitution of the following. 11, appointment of Chief Executive Officer, Bracket 1, the Lieutenant Governor in Council shall appoint a Chief Executive Officer of Health PEI from a list of candidates who have been recruited and recommended by the board. Role of the Chief Executive Officer, bracket 1.1 bracket, the Chief Executive Officer shall be responsible to the board for the general management and conduct of the affairs of Health PEI in accordance with the policies and directions of the board.
Thank you. Any discussion on this amendment? Shall the amendment carry? Carry. Amendment is carried. Any further discussion on the bill as amended? Shall it carry? Carry. I'm going to say one thing first, though. So we're going on this hockey thing today, analogy. So I have to give the first star to the promoter today. For her ability to stick handle and maneuver and put the biscuit in the net in overtime with an assist from the Minister of Health and Wellness.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, I need the title. Oh, Chair, I move the title.
An act to amend the Health Services Act. Shall it carry?
Carry. I move the enacting clause.
Being enacted by the Lieutenant Governor and the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Prince Edward Island as follows. Shall it carry?
Carry. Mr. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report the bill agreed to with amendment.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Whole House having under consideration a bill to be intituled an act to amend the Health Services Act, I beg leave to report that the committee has gone through the said bill and has agreed to same with amendment. I move the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall it carry? The honourable member from Mermaids Stratford, the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I call motion 39 be now read.
Shall it carry?
Motion 39 was already under debate, and debate was adjourned by the honourable member from Summerside South Drive.
The honourable member from Summerside South Drive to continue the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had just about concluded my remarks there last time round, but I would just like to reiterate that the use of this local wood, or the ability to use local wood, would be good for lowering the cost of building a new home. And we're in the middle of a housing crisis here, so I would hope to hear that the minister responsible would be supportive, and I can't wait to hear everyone else's remarks on this motion that is just so terribly important to both the local wood industry and to any prospective homeowners looking to build here on Prince Edward Island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Land.
Thank you, Mr. Can I have the podium, please? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's only appropriate, especially since it's Earth Day, that I preface my comments about this motion with the need to ensure that we have sustainable forest practices that I am proud. Our track record on government planting trees, we made a commitment last election to plant 1 million trees a year, and we are already exceeding that requirement, Mr. Speaker, and I hope the Minister of Environment will plant trees like he paves the island, Mr. Speaker. Even more. I know my colleague, the Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change, is a champion of sustainability, and I'd be happy to work with him to continue to lead the country when it comes to our carbon reduction. With our plan for net zero, and I believe our success is in these initiatives, should we be rooted in reforestation and planting more trees in our province. I will refrain from using the hockey analogy that my member from Summerside Beaumont did this morning. I truly believe the intentions of this motion is to support local mills and support the use of locally produced lumber. And I'm extremely supportive of that. Buying locally supports our local economy at the time where building supplies have increased in demand and reduced supply. This is the time where we should be looking at opportunities to shift consumer behavior to buy more locally produced supplies. Our government also supports PEI local mills owners, and we consulted with them with the island builders before bringing in the National Building Code. Obviously, there are requirements in the National Building Code that we need to respect in these discussions. But no hill is too high to climb, and I'm willing to climb the hill with the islanders to support locally cut wood. There is endless possibilities to make this reality. We've learned to challenge the status quo during this pandemic, to think creatively, to think more locally. And there are opportunities, Mr. Speaker, to do this when it comes to lumber. While I respect the building standards and the National Building Code, I'm happy to say there are many opportunities for locally produced lumber on PEI. Mill operators can sell their product while continuing to uphold the protections of the National Building Code standards offered to home buyers and builders. The new Building Code Act regulations came into effect March 31st, 2020. A year later, they were extended to apply the single-family and semi-detached homes to their accessory structures. The province-wide adaptation of the National Building Code and the National Energy Code for building will ensure a minimum standards are met to protect the occupants with specific regard to public health, fire protection, structural energy efficiency, accessibility for people with disabilities. Improving the standards for residential home construction should protect consumers' health, safety, investment, while helping to reduce the environmental impact of operating a home in Prince Edward Island. The National Building Code of Canada requires the use of stamped lumber based on science and evidence. Assessing the strength of wood and how far it can safely span depends on knowing the moisture content, species of lumber, grade, and information that is determined when wood is inspected and stamped. Experts in the National Research Council and members of their communities were provided with the advice. We ought to listen to this information. There are options for local mills wanting to have their wood inspected and certified by the Maritime Lumber Bureau. The Maritime Lumber Bureau has agreed to work with our local mills by offering periodic visits when local wood can be inspected and stamped for use. All maritime provinces adhere to the National Building Code standards. The National Building Codes Act regulations list several types of buildings that are exempt from requiring building permits and exempt for requirement of grade stamped lumber to be used. They include buildings that fall under the scope of the National Farm Code, resource buildings and accessory structures, and small decks, fences, etc. Right now, very few homes on PEI are constructed using locally milled lumber, but most construction projects using locally milled lumber fall under the use that are exempted from requiring a building permit and therefore are not required to utilize grade stamped lumber. By moving away from the requirement to stamp lumber in residential construction, we would dilute the protection that the National Building Code offers. to home buyers, investment, and safety of occupants. There are options for local mills that can happen without PEI moving away from the National Building Code. It is not in the interest of islanders or the environment to remove these protections. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise to speak to this motion because I think it really it is appropriate, in particular at this time in our island's history. And really, it's during the pandemic, and it's related to that, but it's related to the scarcity of materials. We're seeing the prices rise and for materials. And Mr. Speaker, I think that as the Minister of Agriculture and Land has pointed out, this is an excellent motion because it looks at a solution that may help us ease this. And Mr. Speaker, of course, this exacerbates the problem of housing, and I want to stand and speak to this motion as the Housing Minister, with the realization, of course, that when it comes to housing, there is a full continuum of housing that we have to address, but at the end of the day, housing needs to be built. And when it comes to materials, having lumber that's grown and produced on Prince Edward Island is a key thing. But if we're going to solve our housing problems, and this is one of the latest ones we're facing. This is we have to work across departments to solve them. That's why we are putting to get a team effort forward here. We've got the Minister of Agriculture and Land, who's dealing with a whole variety of planning issues. The Minister of Finance, of course, who's looking at financing several options. I know that we talk about the down payment assistance program, for example. The Minister responsible for infrastructure, of course, needs to be involved as well when we deal with the government-owned land that may be involved, plus the infrastructure. Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism, Culture is also involved. And really, it in many ways, it touches all departments. The Minister of Fisheries and Communities, dealing with the municipalities and the bylaws that are related. So, Mr. Speaker, that's how we're approaching this problem. And when it comes to locally grown and milled lumber, that's one part of the solution. Nick also goes across departments. So, Mr. Speaker, the approach that I like to take is, first of all, to consult with stakeholders to make sure we understand exactly what the problem is and do the research and understand the source of that. And I mean, the member from O'Leary Inverness was asking questions today about this in question period. This is the cost of materials, of course, which is related to this motion. And so that's why, one of the first things that I've done as minister is I've met with the Home Builders Association at their request. We need to work with the Construction Association. We need to listen to developers, and we need to understand the challenges they're facing. Then we can come up with a strategy that's probably cross-department, and we can really move forward with this problem. Now, when it comes to locally produced and milled lumber specifically, I wanted to talk about one of my constituents, Gordon Myers. Now, some of the members in the House may have heard of Mr. Myers. So he lives down on the Myers Road. He's in his mid-80s, and he has played music for many, many years across the island. I believe he was involved in the construction of the Gordon Lodge, which was a gathering place many years ago, and he also played music there. And he still plays and teaches music today out of his home on Myers Road. And there's many, many students that owe their musical knowledge to him. But Mr. Speaker, what he's known for is being a builder. And he and his family, he had several sons, they all were tradespeople as well. And they built many, many houses around the area, especially in the central part of the island, of course, which is around New Glasgow, St. Anne's, Stanley Bridge, Hunter River, that area right up to the North Shore. And Mr. Speaker, in fact, the house that I live in was built by his son, Louis Myers, And I believe that Gordon worked on it and Louis with his brothers. And so I know for a fact that in the house that I live in and the barn that's on my land is lumber that was grown on Prince Edward Island, was milled by Gordon Myers and was used to build this house. So this is, of course, good for a number of reasons. But, and I know the member from Charlottetown Brighton has mentioned this many times before, because the carbon that is sequestered in that wood is stored in my house and will continue to stay there until, you know, the house rots to the ground or is burned, which I hope never happens for quite a long time, Mr. Speaker. So I wanted to give kudos to Gordon Myers, because as I mentioned, he's in his mid-80s, and as recently as this spring, he's still harvesting and milling his own lumber right there on his property with a portable sawmill in St. Anne's on the Myers Road. And it really, it brings joy to my heart. I mean, just a couple other things about Gordon Myers, Mr. Speaker. He's in my mind, he's a real progressive, almost revolutionary in his way of thinking. So back in the 50s, this is long before the hippies, you know, long before, you know, those ways of thinking were ingrained. He started pioneering ways. Like, for example, Mr. Myers, I spent some time speaking with him, is a vegetarian, and he chose to go that route way back in the 1950s because he did the research, he looked at it, he thought critically, and he said, this is what's most healthy for me, for my body, this is what I like for the world and environment, and it was a conscious thought. So, and Mr. Speaker, the trendy side of that came along much later, and I mean, Mr. Speaker, I want to give a big shout out to Gordon Myers and the great contributions that he's made in his lifetime to date, and that he continues to make. One of the things that he does now is he still tours around to many long-term care homes across the island, and many Kayleys, well, and he plays music. Well, until the pandemic hit, he played music on a regular basis with his group. So he continues to contribute, and it's his kind of forward thinking that really has made the island a great place. And when it comes to harvesting and milling lumber, he led the way there, and we need to follow in those footsteps. So, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to rise and support this motion. I think the Minister of Agriculture and Land has talked about some of the technical details of how we get there. But, Mr. Speaker, I support it fully. Thank you very much.
The honourable member from Mallory Inverness, third party whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I did want to take some time after listening to some of the arguments that I've heard so far on this motion, and I would describe this motion as almost, I wrote it down here, as a disservice to the trees that contribute to the paper the motion is written on, Mr. Speaker. This is probably the weakest motion I have ever seen in this legislature that contravenes everything that we would be about here. We, like the Minister responsible for Agriculture and Land, said this is about the Canadian Building Code. The building code is designed to make sure that buildings are built to a certain standard. They're going to comply with issues around insulation and environmental concerns, Mr. Speaker. And I find that this particular motion is contravening that spirit. You can't take a code and then change the code and still mean it's the code. And what I would argue that we need to be doing, sort of like the Minister of Agriculture and Land, we need to make sure that we're working towards how do we support our forestry industry in PEI, which is a vibrant industry, Mr. Speaker. And I happen to have in my riding the largest sawmill in Prince Edward Island, the Betsa Sawmill. And they're a very busy and going concern. And at one time they did have a stamp that they were part of the Maritime Lumber Bureau. And I think that's where we need to be focused on. How do we support our sawmills to make sure that they can comply with the Canadian Building Code? And the Canadian Building Code is focused on making sure that it meets also the standards of the Insurance Bureau of Canada So if you're building a house, whether you want to build to the building code or not, the Insurance Bureau of Canada may determine that you are going to build to the building code or you're not going to get insurance. And we need to be thinking of the bigger picture in this. So to hear the minister responsible for housing to go on that he's supporting a motion that would have not kiln-dried lumber or twisty 2x4s and 2x6s involved in construction, that would compromise the integrity of a structure, it's mind-blowing, Mr. Speaker. I just don't know where to go with it.
Quite a stretch.
It is quite a stretch, yeah. So, and there was an old saying, now, Mr. Speaker, I used to work in the architectural industry. I've been a draftsman. I was a planning technician by trade in my education, Mr. Speaker. And there was an old saying that we used to have with the architects and engineers that we would work within. They could probably design the Taj Mahal, but they couldn't build a birdhouse, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the construction. You have to know how construction works. And, I just sort of wonder if some of the people in this one could drive a nail between them, Mr. Speaker. If you have knots in your lumber and you have all the different things that would contravene stamped lumber, you're going to compromise the structure significantly, and that's going to be an issue, Mr. Speaker. Now, if you look at the building code, there are lots of exemptions in the building code that allow our local sawmills, which, like I say, I have Betts Sawmill, the largest, but I also have Hardy's Sawmill in Freeland, McKee's Sawmill up in Millburn, and Tupland Sawmill in Freeland, Mr. Speaker. So, once again, in the building code, buildings that are for agricultural or fishing purposes are exempt. There's lots of shops going up for fishermen, for their boats and things like that. Lots of business there, Mr. Speaker. I have forestry companies, Glenwood and Jamie Wallace in my district, Mr. Speaker. They're harvesting lumber, and they're selling it to the different sawmills. They're selling it to Betts' sawmill. I get lumber sawed myself. I'm building wagon bottoms and lots of things you can do with your lumber. So I don't know if that's a concern. Also, any building, I think that's under 900 square feet, Mr. Speaker, is also exempt. That's not for residential purposes and not for a place where people would work or where the public can access, is also exempt from the building code, Mr. Speaker. So I think that's not the issue. To me, it's about how do we support our sawmills. A motion that would do that would make some sense. How do we help them get the kilns that they require to dry the lumber? How do we get the stamps? And the minister said that they're working with the Maritime Lumber Bureau to see what they can have intervals for the Maritime Lumber Bureau to come over and inspect some of the lumber, maybe stamp some lumber. That's a perfect solution. But to try to take the integrity of a building construction in Prince Edward Island and compromise that, Mr. Speaker, is definitely not the way I would want to go. I think we want to make sure that, we're trying to apply science in the decision-making, of which the Canadian Building Code does. To believe that the Green Party would contravene wanting to go with science on decision-making and compromise construction astounds me to no end, Mr. Speaker. Astounds me to no end. And, so I think when I certainly look at this particular motion, like I said, we want to allow locally cut wood. We want to use it for many construction purposes. Decks might make some sense. There's some things that don't compromise the structural integrity of our particular buildings. Our residential homes in Prince Edward Island are homes that are used for commercial purposes for where the public and people work at. Those are the things that we want to do. And when we look at a motion of this nature, I would hope that members of this legislature put a little more thought into the motions and try to make sure that they're focusing on the realities of what's out there, Mr. Speaker, applying the science, applying the good public judgment that we deal with here, Mr. Speaker. So I support my sawmills. I'm happy to hope that the sawmills in my district, we can work, and I would urge government and the Minister of Forestry to see what they can do to make sure that we can get some stamps on Prince Edward Island here, that we can get somebody trained that can do the stamp. I think I even challenged the Minister of Forestry, the previous Minister of Forestry, to do that, Mr. Speaker. Get somebody trained. Maybe somebody from government can be trained at doing the inspections. We have, food inspectors that inspect our beef plants, inspect many different products that we put out here. That's an argument. If that was in the motion, could sort of see where that would go, so we could stamp our lumber here and help our sawmills and support that, Mr. Speaker. So those are the directions that I think that we would have to go. And like I say, in getting the stamped lumber, you have to have a kiln. Betts' sawmill has a kiln. They can do all that. Let's try to support the kilns, that we can have kilns in our attached to our sawmills. I know I talked with Hardy Sawmill, Lloyd Hardy, about that possibility. You know, what would be something that you could do to maybe develop a kiln and have that we could dry our lumber and do it in a proper way. Now, he wasn't sure that the business sense was there for it, Mr. Speaker, but that's where government can come in. That's where government can come and provide supports to subsidize the opportunity for sawmills in Prince Edward Island to get a kiln. You know, then the business model does work there, Mr. Speaker. We can do that. So that's the type of stuff that we need to be doing here. And you know, I think I've been a long-time advocate that the building code is valued. We were the only jurisdiction in Canada that didn't mandate the building code. Many houses were already built to the building code anyway. I might emphasize that, but even in our city of Charlottetown, city of Summerside, you had to build to the building code. So this isn't nothing that's new or radical in that regard. And to me, this is political opportunism, trying to take a few sawmills that may be seeing that there may be some impacts here with not properly thinking out a motion, thinking out the way that this could actually solve and work with a particular industry to solve the problem, yet allow the building code to move forward, Mr. Speaker. So obviously with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm not waffling on whether I'm supporting or not this motion. I'm not supporting this motion. Well, we know that the Minister of Social Development hasn't changed his mind. He changed his mind more than he changed his underwear, Mr. Speaker. So we need this guy. He's hard to pin down as a critic here. But, so, you know, yeah. So anyway, Mr. Speaker, I will not be supporting this particular motion. I will be advocating on the side of the Minister of Agriculture and Land, as he seems to have a good handle on this particular issue. I wish he could get some of his colleagues to support him on that and persuade him on that, and we'll go from there, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the motion? No? I'll go back to the mover of the motion, the honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not quite sure where to start to respond to that, but I have also, besides being an architect following the building code for many, many years, I've always been a carpenter and contractor, and I will challenge you to a nailing competition anytime. Anyhow, I appreciate the fact that the minister has been consulting with industry, builders, developers. My proposed regulation won't change what they use. They already use imported lumber because they get it in bigger quantities, bigger dimensions, what have you. That won't change at all. The building code, despite what the member from Inverness suggests, is not like the Bible. It can be amended. It is amended by most of the provinces and has already been amended by Charlottetown extensively, presumably weakening it, but nevertheless adopting it to the actual situation here. As for what kiln drying does, it doesn't really do anything. It gets kilns dried, it gets delivered to the yard, half of the yard. They take the cover up, and it sits out in the backyard until somebody buys it. Then it gets framed up, and it gets rained upon, and it doesn't really matter whether it's kiln dried or not. Any good builder knows that before he actually encloses the wood, he has to let it be dry enough. And there you go. And as for the stamp, I'm all in support. I think the honourable member should get kiln dryers and stamping people in any sawmills in this district. What I'm speaking about, what we have now, is many really small windmills. It's just something you put on a trailer, pull out in the woods, and you take the logs that you just cut down to make place for your house, and you cut them into 2x4s. It's that simple. And I built the house just last year, like that, and the neighbor right next door is doing the same, and we start a little, not huge, but significant method like that. And I will remind you again, all buildings here in PEI up till around 1950 was built wood that was harvested locally. It was not stamped, and it was not kiln dried, and they still stand. So I recently received a complaint from a constituent concerning the extraordinary price increases we all have seen in construction materials. He was suggesting we control the prices through Iraq. That would be a near impossible thing to do, as our construction materials come from the entire world, with countries competing against each other to produce the cheapest and best components. The only place where that is not true is for lumber. Here we can compete with the local lumber as long as we allow it. Harvesting wood for chips or pulp just pumps more CO2 into the atmosphere. Much better to use it as lumber, which will capture and store the CO2 for centuries. And I'm all for planting new trees. Irving has been planting new trees where they cut it down for years. So I'm not quite sure what's so new about doing that. And in any case, since there's no track on the trees we cut down elsewhere, I think you'll find that what the province does is pumping more CO2 out in the atmosphere than they're capturing. Anyway, it's rare that this legislature can substantially support homeowners, support local economy and the environment at no risk and no cost whatsoever. So I move, seconded by the member from Summerside South Drive, that we close debate on this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, honorable members, I'll call a question. All those in favor of the motion, please say yay. Yay. All those against the motion, please say nay. Nay. She's pretty close. Could be a tie. Honorable members, those in favor, please raise your hand.
Oh, Minister.
1, 2, 3. 9. All those against, please raise your hand. Woo. That's pretty close. Honorable members, motion did not pass. Honorable members, the hour has been called. The honorable member from Morel, Donna, and the government house leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the member from Montague-Kilmer, that this House do adjourn until April 23rd at 10 o'clock in the a.m.
Shall carry.